Good evening, and in the absence of our Treasurer Wagner, I need a board member to serve as Treasurer Pro Tem. Do I have a motion?
Make a motion that we have our normal Treasurer Pro Tem and Board Member Craig.
Thank you. Motion from Mr. Craig. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you very much. And we will now have I don't think there's any reason to have discussion about it, but if we will have our Assistant Treasurer, who is in batting for our Treasurer, Ms. Wagner. Mr. Guston, would you please call the roll for that Treasurer Pro Tem?
Sure, with pleasure. Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Mr. Crossett?
Yes.
Mr. Lindy?
Yep.
Ms. Mapp?
Yes.
Dr. Moffitt?
Yes.
Vice President Weinberg?
Yes.
And President Bolden?
Yes, and thank you, Mr. Craig. And thank you, Mr. Guston. Seeing a quorum of voting members, I call the October 7th Cincinnati School Board meeting to order. We have our Treasurer Pro Tem, and now we will have our Assistant Treasurer actually call the roll.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Mr.
Good
Craig?
evening.
Here.
Mr. Crossett? Here. Mr. Lindy?
Here.
Ms. Mapp?
Here.
Dr. Moffitt?
Here.
Vice President Weinberg?
Here.
And President Bolden?
Present. Interim Superintendent Murphy, would you please introduce our students from the school that is presenting tonight our Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes, ma'am. Very happy to introduce the students from Hayes Porter School, where Mrs. Nedria West is the principal. This presentation put together by our communications team.
Please rise.
On behalf of Hayes Porter School,
Thank you. And thank you, Interim Superintendent, for making those arrangements. We really appreciate it. It's the best way possible to start the meeting. I need a motion. Actually, I don't need a motion because we're not changing the agenda tonight. We're not amending it. We're kind of moving it a little bit, I guess, the other folks taking care of it. Vice President Weinberg, would you please explain how people may participate virtually?
Yes, members of the public who are online and wish to speak during our hearing of the public this evening may do so by clicking the chat button now. The chat feature will be open for your request for 5 minutes, and if you would like a direct response to your question, please make sure to share your name, your affiliation to the district, your school community, your topic, and also your contact information.
Thank you. The chair will now entertain a motion and a second to approve the October 7th business meeting agenda. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Crossett. Is there a second?
Second.
I think it requires a vote.
Okay. Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Mr. Crossett?
Yes.
Mr. Lindy?
Yes.
Ms. Mapp?
Yes.
Dr. Moffitt?
Yes.
Vice President Weinberg?
Yes.
And President Bolden?
Yes. Board member, Dr. Moffitt, would you now kind of update us about the Ohio School Board Association's 2024 official business regarding the delegate assembly?
Yes, ma'am. So I passed out at the last board meeting the agenda of what has been presented and will be discussed during the General Assembly. Wanted to collect some feedback from any board member that had any discussion or any changes that we as a district in Cincinnati would like to present. Did you all happen to have anything to add? This is our time to put our voice around deletions, some suggested inserts. It's on board docs, Rob. I don't know if you all want to bring it up or.
I appreciate you sharing that, having done that a couple of times. It's a big responsibility, and indeed, if you look through this rather voluminous document, it actually gives us some good guidance about where education is in the state of Ohio. I'm very pleased with the things that are listed there. The only area that I felt a little bit more, and I was very happy about the kind of assertiveness of the legislative material. I still think that we should be able to have somebody, and I know in Toledo, they're trying to get a group of folks to legislatively commit or try to advocate for preschool as a mandatory grade.
Okay.
And I know that that's going to be probably brought to the delegate assembly. But I think very strongly that one of the things that we could offer in lieu of that, or in addition to, is the thing that the treasurer points out to us very often, which is that we have so many students because of the great thing of preschool promise and what we've been able to do. We have almost, I think, 150 classes of preschoolers within our district, let alone the private providers as well. I know it's the most extensive preschool system in the state, is right here because of the community effort that's been made. But I really feel strongly that those students should count toward our student complement when indeed people try to, when the state tries to reshape the state formula for us, because they do not count toward us, and it costs us money, significant amount of money, and hopefully when the gerrymandering effort wins on election day, we might be able to look at a slightly or greatly different legislative body. But I just think every chance we get, and if you would be willing to state that during the delegate convention when you have an opportunity to speak, I think it would be a good idea. And I know other districts have preschool, and it doesn't count to their benefit for the formula. And I think it would be many, many, many dollars that we would be getting, because as we all know, we are at the basic end of the carryover from the first years, and so we have to be thinking about additional monies. Yep. So it is something I would appreciate you advocating for that.
I sure will. If the administration could just get some data for me to around how many, the impact, the financial impact that could possibly be for us, the increase and the number that we have, that would be great. And I have no problem standing up and advocating for us to get more money. Absolutely. Does anyone else?
And you do it so well for us up there.
And
with
loudly,
OSBA. Appreciate it.
But there, Rob, I don't know.
You have some other items to share with us?
Well, I don't know if anyone else had an opportunity to look through their, the packet, if there were any other items that stood out to you. It's really interesting that some of the things that are being proposed during the political cycle are also reflected here on some capacity. And so I wanted you all to really take a look at that as well, to see, hey, there's things that we're doing around our equity policy that other districts are trying to legislate with regard to OSBA, and it kind of got shot down. So we are definitely trendsetters, but just if there's an area that you find, I think a lot of us are going to the conference in November. But if there's an area that you find later on that maybe we need a little bit more attention drawn to benefit CPS specifically, let us know. To the superintendent, do you know when the lobbyists, our lobbyists are coming to talk to us? That was one thing I wanted to have.
I believe they're coming to the next board meeting.
Okay, on the 26th?
Yes.
Okay, 28th.
28th.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And if you all have any questions there, maybe I could also cross-reference some of the official business info that's being proposed for OSBA around the bills that are there on the table too. So
Great.
that's it.
Any other comments? Again, I'm pleased that OSBA is advocating for the kinds of things that we've been talking about publicly whether it's our curriculum and being proud of our social studies standards and curriculum, and or whether it's about books and reading and what have you. It's good to know that our association is carrying that banner. Thank you very much. Board members Mapp and Lindy, you have something to share. It's a carryover, and it has something to do with something coming out of policy. There's no decision to be made, but I believe it's a need for discussion.
So thank you. So yes, in our policy meeting, we have been having conversation around just strengthening the superintendent evaluation policy. And some of those areas pertain to the timeline in which the superintendent will be evaluated. So we know that it's stated that there's a March 1 kind of deadline or before that date, and hoping to look into the evaluation happening after, or in October, after we receive data from the state. And then there's also around, transparency and just the transparency of the content, as well as making sure that the evaluation aligns to the academic outcomes for students. So just having conversation around it, wanted to bring it to you all to see and have some input so that we can take it back to the committee to make some additional revisions, but I will have Ben share information about it as well.
Thank you very much. I don't know that I have a ton more to add, and I'm grateful to my colleague. I unfortunately need to step out of tonight's meeting in about 5 minutes, and then I'll be back in maybe about 8:30 or so if we're still going. I think I had just a couple of thoughts on substance and a couple of thoughts on process. Substance, I think Ms. Mapp mentioned most of these already, which is that part of the idea was to have a superintendent policy for evaluation that focuses more explicitly on outcomes for students. That's thought one. And this really does, I think, line up, at least the way the draft is written, with our, I'm not sure what this is.
This should be the proposed policy.
Yeah, could we pull up the?
1240, right?
Yep.
Nope.
There we go. Great. So this is the current. And then if you scroll down, you'll see the draft that we discussed in the last policy committee meeting. And there's so much in here. I just wanted to pull out a couple themes. One is the focus on student outcomes. And I think within that, focusing particularly on improvements in opportunity for students of color and low-income students, so that there's an alignment here between the eval policy and the equity policy, and alignment between the eval policy and the anti-racism policy. So I think this is bringing some of our policies into tighter dialogue with one another. There's also, I think, a push to make sure we're voting in public on what the evaluation is going to be each year before the year gets too far underway, and that there's a public vote on the final evaluation for each year. My colleague mentioned the timing and coherence piece. I think I would just also say, separate from the substance, there's a process point in all of this too, which is, I think, one of the things I appreciated about Board Member Morosky's leadership on the anti-racism policy was really bringing that draft to the full board for full board dialogue and feedback before recommending any final version. And so we had, I think, a really good first discussion in policy. I'm sure we'll talk about it again, but this was an effort really to collect feedback from the full board before we got too far down the field with anything. So we really wanted to listen, capture questions, capture ideas, take those back to the group, and then come back with our best thinking. Did I miss anything?
Because this is still in policy, and there's not been action except an introduction to this policy.
That's right.
Correct. Again, we just wanted to make sure that before we presented it to you all for approval, we wanted to ensure that everyone had an opportunity to give their feedback, highlight anything that we may have overlooked or areas of oversight, so that we can collaboratively work to strengthen the policy and it can reflect all of our voice and take it back to have discussion in the policy meeting.
Vice President?
Yes, so I just have a couple of questions. So if we're looking at this, the current and the proposal, Board Member Lindy, if I'm looking at this and I have some suggestions or corrections, how am I going to know? I guess, what's the new added part here? So like you have something crossed out and then there's something highlighted. Is that what you added, or how would we know as board members what is different? Unless I can pull up the other one and then put them side by side.
So the previous page is the prior one. So if you just scroll up one page, you can see the original.
Yeah, so I'm on this one of three right here. So this first page is what you're currently wanting us to look at?
You can start with either, like what's on the screen is the current one, and that's the
Right.
first page of the PDF.
Right.
And then if you go down to the second page, anything in strike through, so in that first line, Board of Education shall annually, if it's got a strike through on it, the draft would remove that. And then anything that's underlined, the draft is saying, this would be there instead.
So in this first part here, you have something highlighted and then you have something underlined. Are you saying that you're scratching out that one sentence and you want to include, I think it's 2 or 3 sentences right here? Is that what you're saying?
That's right.
Okay. And when would you like us to give some suggestions on it? I read through it, but I was a little confused, and so I'm thankful that you clarified some things. I do have some suggestions and corrections that I would like to add.
Yeah, I mean, I think the hope was to get that tonight.
I will send it a little bit later.
Okay, because our goal is to bring it back to, for the next policy meeting, which I think is, Friday, October 11th. date.
I'll send an email today or tomorrow. Thank you.
Dr. Moffett?
Well, I think this is great. I do think I have some concerns around, and well, first of all, let me say, I appreciate all the work that the policy committee has taken to do this. I am a little confused around the energy of this, instituting this policy, when we spent such a significant amount of time in years with a small little paragraph. So I appreciate all the work. I had some inconsistencies that I found in here that I will definitely put in writing and attempt to get them into you all by your policy meeting if I don't attend. But I do have some questions. What is the procedure around those that sit on the policy committee bringing up things in a bias environment that are relevant to them? I always was under the impression, under former board member Morosky, that the discussion would be on the floor and it would be to all of the board members as to if there was even the need to expend energy to the policy committee to draft something, or is it something that maybe the board had no interest in and it was not biased towards 1 or 2 members? I'm wondering if what the process is and if we followed that with regard to this particular one. For instance, I'll give you an example. I think that there are relevant policies, particularly after our visit from the city, that I would love for the policy committee to work on with regard to code of conduct at transit centers, perhaps some other things. We've had some emails around staffing decisions for transportation, transportation decisions that are relevant to our staff, that the policy committee, that I was going to bring up tonight to see if we could assign to the policy committee rather than have personal intentions of members of the policy committee come up and then they spend a lot of their time on things that perhaps weren't relevant to the full board. So I kind of want to understand what is the procedure based on how we've been doing it versus how it's been done on this one.
Mr. Lindy?
I'm happy to respond.
Chairman.
So, with the broad disclaimer that this is, despite having been board president for 2 years, this is my first time as the policy committee chair. So we're going to learn as we go here. But my intention was to invite topic suggestions from everybody. So if we rewind to a couple of months ago, there was an effort to get requests from all board members. I would say most, but not all, submitted topics for us to consider. And then separate from board members, the General Counsel's office has a triennial review of policies that they want to make sure go through the committee. We had done less of that in the last year or so. And so at our committee meeting we had in September, we looked at, made some changes to, and recommended a schedule for the rest of the year that was a combination of all of those things, so that the general counsel's office gets their items reviewed. Any board member who requested any topic got put on the calendar, so that over the course of the year, we'd get through all of them. We even left space for some things that we couldn't anticipate yet, because we had an idea that maybe other topics would come up or some would take more time. So if there are other requests people have, we even have space for that in the coming months. So my intention, if any of my colleagues had a different experience, I'm certainly open to feedback. But I think the intention was to make sure there's room for everybody's requests.
Thank you.
Dr. Moffett?
It doesn't completely answer my question, and I'm looking at your calendar. For September, we had the CPS Foundation and philanthropic activities, and then we've got interim superintendent policy 9149 by board member Mapp, and then superintendent evaluation by board member Lindy. But October, we've got board superintendent communication policy. We've got some other things that were requested prior to, by myself, that were requested prior to September. So I'm wondering about the order. But again, my question still remains unanswered. What has been and will be the procedure around getting policies implemented by the policy committee? I was always under the impression, under former board member Morosky, for the past 3 years, we brought the items that board members were considering to the board, and then an assignment was made to assign that to policy committee for further investigation, for further discussion, and then it was brought back. If there was not enough interest by the board to continue to expand, develop a policy, then it kind of died there. So I'm wondering, did we follow that, or is this just something that 2 members of the policy committee wanted and have pushed that up in a timeline without bringing it to the full board first to see if there's even the desire for further discussion? So this is definitely a procedure question, but it's also going back historically to how things have been done under board member Morosky, who was definitely a different chair, but that's how we had been doing it. And I think even under your presidency.
Before I go to policy member Mapp, just a little historical, this is my function, historical frame of reference. First and foremost, as a result of Melanie Bates's tenure on policy, the district has, over a number of years, had a regular cyclical movement led, if you will, by general counsel to have, over a 3-year period, all policies reviewed. So that's part of what policy has done. It is not that unusual for board members, even on policy or in the board, to make some suggestions as to what needs to be before the policy committee. But you're right, the major work usually is sent from the board, but it does not negate policy or other board committees of generating their own priorities or interests. I do think that I think it's important that that we have access to this, and that this is going to require a significant amount of discussion. And before I relinquish the mic and to policy member Mapp, I will say I would really hope, at least looking at this text, I'd like to submit some specifics as with the vice president. But one thing I really do want to see that is lined out, that I don't want to see lined out any longer as you guys go back and work on it, is the paragraph that talks about, prior to the beginning of the academic year, the superintendent shall establish goals that are consistent with the board's goals. That whole collaborative role. I am the last person on this board that would ever say, let's make sure the superintendent has enough power rather than the board. But the reality is I like that there was that collaborative effort. Mr. Lindy and
I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to jump the line.
Go ahead.
Before I feel so badly I have to leave, I will come back. You made this point in the meeting. I think it's well taken.
Okay.
I did not change any of the text because we haven't had a meeting
Oh,
since
you
that
shouldn't have.
meeting.
And
But
you shouldn't
I
have.
just want to check. I think if this is the comment that you made during the meeting, I'm on board 100%.
Thank you.
I just wanted to make sure, is this the same thought? And
I've got a
be
few others, but that was the
Okay.
one that was most
I thought that was
important.
well taken.
Yes.
Member Mapp.
So thank you, President Bolton, for providing that perspective on processes and procedures. And that's my understanding as well, even when Chair Morosky was here on the policy committee. I'm under the impression that General Counsel does a 3-year cycle review, as well as is no different from any other committee, just such as health and safety. We have opportunity to present some things that we want to see on the agenda or some things that we want to make, possibly lean into a little bit further. And so that's how we have drafted the agenda. So you use the word bias. I kind of find that difficult to digest and receive because I think we've done our very best to be very objective and inclusive to everyone, providing their perspective, as well as we've opened it up to, or I know the chair has opened it up to everyone to provide comments about anything that they wanted to bring to policy. And so we've placed it on an agenda so that we are able to have discussion about it and bring it back to the full board to see if this is areas of improvement or if this is something that should have consideration. So thank you for your concern, for your question. But again, I think we've been doing a diligent job, of trying to be objective and very inclusive in the process.
Thank you, Member Mapp. Vice President?
Just have a quick question. So with the topics that you all opened up for board members to add, being now that we've encountered some different situations, and if we would like to still add something, is that possible to do? We could just send the email to you all?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
I'm sure
'cause
that
I
as a
have two
committee-
things that I'd like to add, just due to some things that have recently happened within the couple of weeks or month.
Okay, definitely believe that that is something that we are able to do, and Board Member Costa can add to it as well. There are even things that we have decided that are topics of interest that we may not even get to. So it's not a matter of us pushing our concerns ahead of anyone else's. This is just topics that we've placed on the calendar, and hopefully, again, we are able to have open discussion about those policy concerns.
Thank you, Member Mapp. Chairman Craig?
So I just want to make a comment about the actual topic that we were supposed to be talking about,
Thank
which
you.
is this policy 1240. And I wanted to note, and I think this is an important thing that we should be paying attention to, is that a board had discussed about changing up to connect some of the measurable outcomes to the superintendent's evaluation process. And I really want to just give credit for the fact of recognizing that that's not really feasible to do in March, which has always been our struggle with doing evaluations in the mid-year even, is because you're evaluating numbers that then ultimately you won't have any information for about another 5 months. And so, you could have a person doing what you feel to be a phenomenal job, and then results come back and they're terrible, or vice versa. And so I think that's something that, again, recognizing and appreciating from this policy is acknowledging. And then to President Bolton's point about making the process more collaborative, and I appreciated that thought as well with regard to the policy itself, because I do believe this is not just goals that we set. These are goals that we would work with the superintendent to establish, and that these goals should also be guided by what is actually possible, right? So we can put down 99% graduation rate, but if that's truly what we want to expect, we might be looking for a new superintendent every year, right? Like, the reality is that these goals should be something that's both measurable but also achievable. And so I think I appreciate you all doing the hard work of looking into that.
Great. Mr. Crossett?
I wanted to follow on Mary, and Board Member Mapp can correct me, but I think we're trying to have time in each of our meetings open for new topics to come in. So I think that was part of the planning, we were going to not captivate all the time of every meeting for just what was on the plan to talk about.
Thank you, Member Mapp.
Thank you for that, Board Member Crossett, and thank you, Board Member Craig, for bringing the focus back to the policy, because again,
to your point, we did have conversation, and Interim Superintendent Murphy can also, I guess, attest to this as well, talking about that collaborative scope in terms of how to make this policy a little bit more succinct. And we've been doing that review for several of our policies, making sure that there's clear and concise information so that it's not so vague, but we have very specific language around it and strengthening that. And so we did work on talking about having collaborative goals and having conversation with the superintendent to make sure that we're on one accord in terms of what the evaluation would entail.
Dr. Moffett.
Thank you so much for the clarification. With respect to part 2, I know in the previous years, we had given the option of the voting being public to the superintendent to do. So perhaps that could be added in there as well, that right now it sounds as if it's mandatory. And again, I'm happy to put all this in writing, but it says by public vote as well. And I think that needs to remain reflective at the choice of the superintendent that's in place. That was one thing that I thought we actually had that carry over from before around what's technically employment of a public official and what is actually public and what isn't. So I would love to see how this could be reflective of at the discretion of the superintendent, as it has been in the past when we first wrote it.
Thank you, Dr. Moffett. I would add just a couple things. I think the thing that made me take a bit of a hitch to it is that some of this seemed to embed the previous experience. And I think that's probably why there might have been some, that's why I was feeling some degree of resistance. It seemed like the previous evaluation regarding the previous superintendent. I think it's great to embed student outcomes, but I think it does have to be whoever is the current board to determine actually what percentage that should be. I don't want to take, I want to have a great platform for boards that follow us, because we've made good decisions, but I don't want to remove too much discretion from duly elected boards facing particular issues. I do like the idea of embedding some of our hallmark policies within this evaluation, because that should be an expectation for any superintendent. And I was happy that, I think Dr. Moffett is right, that I do believe that both the treasurer and the superintendent ought to have some degree of control on how they want to present and how we want to do the evaluation public or, in executive session. I do think that would be useful, but I'm very happy that there's an interest and a willingness, having lived through what we lived last year. I'm so happy to see most of this is about being in public, because that really caused some issues previously, that we were keeping something from the public, and that didn't help. So I think keep working on this. Other comments as we send this back to policy? Member Matt.
Just the final point to your comment as
Please.
well. So yes, there's that public piece that we're calling out, but also keeping in mind that it doesn't remove any discussion in executive session around, feedback or just progress with the superintendent. So that area is still there. Also, like you talked about, those other areas of evaluation, that's still included. So again, it's providing just more of a holistic perspective of evaluation than just one set piece. And so just wanted to just call that out for you too.
Great, thank you. As I said, keep working. Any other last comments as we move on from now old business to new business? Great, thank you. Thanks for the discussion, everybody. I know the policy will appreciate it. Our next item is, do board members have any acknowledgements or announcements? I know that the superintendent does, but before we get to the superintendent, Madam Vice President.
Yes, I just have one. Just wanted to give a huge kudos to the Woodward Career and Technical High School for hosting. My first ever that I attended was the naturalization ceremony. It was an amazing opportunity to see our new citizens become U.S. citizens. And I think it was over 40 individuals, I think. And just wanted to congratulate them all, and then everyone who obviously helped out to make that day very special for them.
Thank you. Other acknowledgements, announcements by board members? Dr. Moffett?
I just so happened to be on the phone with our treasurer, and I told her I was going to do this. She was celebrating her 31st anniversary. And so she says, oh.
At
CPS. At CPS.
Not with Bill,
Yeah,
but
31st.
yes, okay.
So I said, happy 31st anniversary to Jan Wagner.
Yeah. I'm sure, I'm surprised we don't. Member Mapp?
So I just want to recognize National Hispanic Heritage Month.
Thank you.
And I want to give a huge shout out to Pleasant Hill Academy, who had their door contest to just celebrate this month. And it was just so amazing because it allowed an opportunity for the students to get engaged and the teachers to get engaged. And so I was able to be one of the judges of the door contest, and it was just an awesome experience. So shout out to Pleasant Hill Academy, as well as, again, just recognizing National Hispanic Heritage Month as well.
Thank you. Other board members have comments, kudos before we go to the superintendent? I'd like to share just a couple. As a person that spent 36 years teaching at Wyoming high school in the valley, so to speak, and past Hartwell School, I don't know how many times during the day because you'd have to go back for rehearsal and other stuff and what have you. But the Hartwell School is now celebrating their centennial. They have now been a school in that neighborhood for 100 years. And I appreciate the principal's work, the resource coordinators. There was also some baseball players there from Y'all's down in Florence. Enjoyed meeting them, and it was a great festive experience, and I appreciate people honoring the history. I really do. And I also do want to do we seldom get this opportunity. We do want to thank Cincinnati Federation of Teachers for hosting the Cope Breakfast and bringing to our attention the great wisdom of Mr. David Pepper, and also one of our congressmen in our district, Greg Landsman. So hats off to that standing room only, basically, and it was great, and I appreciated the opportunity, and I appreciated the political education that was taking place as we had our breakfast. So thank you very much. Any others before we go? Okay, Superintendent, you've got some things to share with us.
I have a few, thank you. The first one I do want to share is not on the slide, and that's because it's an event that just happened Saturday night, and that is a kudos to the School for Creative and Performing Arts and their Fund Development Committee with Principal Owens and Teresa Sume-Haas, the External Relations Officer. They had Let's Groove Tonight, Saturday night, as their fundraiser. It was an awesome, awesome time. There were two, I guess I would describe them as kind of cover bands, Kool and the Gang and Earth, Wind and Fire, and the SCPA Chamber Orchestra children played underneath the Earth, Wind and Fire group. It was excellent. In addition to that, I have a couple of things, one for a central office employee and then two school-based employees. So we received a letter of heartfelt thanks from the School Nutrition Association in honor of our COO, Mr. Chris Burkhart, who's absent tonight, for his role as their secretary and treasurer on the organization's board of directors. So congratulations to him. And then teacher-wise, from William Howard Taft Elementary School, congratulations to Mr. Keontae Alexander, who is a teacher at Taft Elementary. He was named the STEM Elementary Educator of the Year by the Gaskins Foundation during their 6th annual STEMI Awards. This was the previous Saturday, September 28th. And then we also have Ms. Shauna Legree, another teacher at Robert A. Taft Information Technology High School. She was named the STEM High School Educator of the Year by the Gaskins Foundation. Great. And then finally, just a big thanks to the community at large. Our students, our parents, our staff, our employees, thank you for supporting last Tuesday's community conversation about addressing violence in the community as it relates to those things that come into the schoolhouses. So thank you.
And no retirements tonight.
I don't think we have any retirements tonight. It's October.
That's a very good thing. We appreciate that. If that is it, then, Madam Vice President, I believe the chair is yours.
The chair is mine. We are now at the item on our agenda for hearing of the public. Each speaker will have 2 minutes and will address all comments to the presiding officer. If you're online, once a request to speak has been granted, you will be invited to enter. You should click on the camera icon to go interactive, provide your name, your affiliation to the district, your school community, your topic, and your contact information if you would like a response to any questions that you might have. This request is consistent with board protocol, and we appreciate your help. In the unusual event that someone is not willing to follow this protocol, we reserve the right to end that person's time. Again, each person will have 2 minutes to speak. When the timer goes off, your time is up, and please refrain from discussing any personnel items. After speaking, if you're online, you'll briefly see the welcome screen again as you transition back to the live stream meeting. Finally, we ask that your public commentary be respectful of all listeners, and I will ask Mr. Wilson, do we have any online callers?
To the Vice Chair, we have one caller today.
So we will start with the one online caller, and then we have 2 in-person speakers.
Great. Candida, you can unmute your camera and microphone and go ahead. You have 2 minutes.
Hi, it's Candida. My question is, if there is a reason that students cannot keep their cell phones in their backpacks, instead of using the Yonder pouches. My son goes to Woodward. I'm a parent. There are significant concerns about violence. I don't think I really need to explain that. But there are some other concerns as well, and he was just keeping his cell phone in his backpack. And they searched his backpack, and that's fine. I understand why they need to go through metal detectors and search the backpacks. But according to the law, the new law that went into effect, as long as it's in a backpack, it's still in accordance with the law. So just curious why he couldn't just keep it in his backpack and what the policy is on that.
Thank you so much. We have 2 speakers. Our first speaker is Jeff Sutton, and then the next speaker will be Julie Sellers. If you want to go ahead and make your way down to the podium. Hi.
Are we? Yeah,
Yep,
we're alive
you
here.
are on.
So I'm back. I remain Jeff Sutton, and I'm still the chair of the LSDMC at Frederick Douglass School. And I remain concerned about public education in Walnut Hills. Frederick Douglass School is more than a century old. It's more than a century and a half old. And it's been a crucial part of our neighborhood. And my concern is that in, what was it, January or February, there was a plan to reorganize according to the ad hoc committee. And we discovered in the agenda that part of the thing that it said was going to be voted on was closing Frederick Douglass School. So here I am, having talked to many people a great deal, and I find myself seeing that we're supposed to have resolution by the end of November for phase 2, and we at Douglass don't have any idea of what's going to happen. And it's very difficult for teachers, for families to try to operate under those circumstances. So hope we'll get more clarity soon.
Thank you so much. Our last speaker, Julie Sellers.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I just want to let you know and the public know that the lawsuit for vouchers Hurt Ohio, which was supposed to begin on November the 5th, has now been delayed and will not go to court until next year. So I think that as other states are voting to say that the vouchers are not constitutional in those other states, that there will be more evidence against vouchers in Ohio. The evidence is clear that the vouchers are not helping students, and it's bleeding money from the public schools funding. And then I want to let everyone know, and I'm not sure if you are aware of this, but as you're talking tonight about the building and the plans of what could be happening across the district with the growth plan, when you look at these charts, there are many buildings that are over capacity, but there are tons of buildings who are under capacity. And there is a Senate bill, it's Senate Bill 308. It has not left the Senate yet to go to the House, but that probably could happen very quickly in lame duck. This Senate bill was written and was submitted in conjunction with the Fordham Foundation's report on building capacity. The language states that any public schools in the state of Ohio not at capacity the state has the ability and the authority to consolidate under-enrolled schools and transfer those students to other schools within the district and transfer the under-enrolled schools to charter schools. The public here in Cincinnati has paid for, through the facility master plan, to rebuild all of our schools. That will not be paid off for several more years. We are still paying, as taxpayers, the mortgage on our facility master plan. And I hope that the district and the public comes out strong to support that how we use our schools has to change, and that our schools have to be filled to capacity. And that is making sure that we can shift some of those programs, especially every high school is over 100% capacity, and many of our elementaries are under capacity. We're not saying we have to change schools, but we have to change locations where kids go to school in order so we can keep our schools. This is something that CPS has always been ahead of the curve on, is making sure that we are utilizing our schools so we don't become the victim of bad policy coming from the state. So as we are moving forward, make sure that we are keeping a close watch on that, but we also need to think about how we are utilizing our schools so that none of our schools are turned over to charter schools. So thank you very much. And the numbers in this report, when I looked at it, they're very clear. We have over-enrolled schools that need less kids, and we have under-enrolled schools that need more kids. So we just have to figure out how we're going to adjust that. So thank you.
Thank you so much. We do not have any further speakers, so we are done with hearing of the public.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Interim Superintendent, I see that you have a couple of presentations, and we also, although our treasurer is not here, Finance Chair, Mr. Craig, is going to be presenting some information. But we start with you, Madam
Happy
Interim.
to start. Thank you. And Julia Indulacio, our Director for Human Resources and Talent, will come to give the first presentation.
Good evening.
Good
I'm going
evening.
to invite the managers to come down from HR and have a seat. So thank you for having us this evening. Good evening, President Bolton, Vice President Weinberg, board members, Interim Superintendent Murphy, and Assistant Treasurer Mike Guston. Appreciate you. Just a little bit about HR, just a reminder that we're a big umbrella. So we cover, lots of people think of HR and they think we're going to hire people. We do that. but we also cover them with benefits. And we also make sure that their professional development is underscored. And we also make sure that the district's broader goals are met through staffing. And so all of those are really important key functions of what HR does. As you know, last year we did a little bit of changing around of some administrative roles. And so I wanted to just give you the broadest picture overlay of what HR looks like this year. And so what I did is I did a lot of thinking around the audit that was done a couple years ago. I did a lot of thinking about what the American Association of School Personnel Administrators looks at when they think about good quality HR practices, and really reorg the department so it's into buckets that make sense around the work that we do. So our first bucket is recruitment, development, and retention. And so that's where you see recruiting. That's where you see kind of classic HR, talent acquisition and engagement. And the lead for that is Rolanda Smith. Rolanda. And our retention and development manager is Kevin Rosebrook. So those two fine folks work on that work. We have staffing, which is sort of classic HR, right? Hiring people, onboarding them, keeping them in the roles, making sure that they're retained, that sort of work falls under staffing. Lucius Jones is our civil service manager, and Shane Weary is stepping into both our certificated staffing manager, and he works with our data team. Shane. And then we have total compensation and wellness, which is benefits. Mr. Keith Grace still retains that position. And we also added a new column called Grow, Perform, and Succeed, which is about performance management, but it's more than that. It's also about how do we develop fit folks. And so Travis Rowley is here, and Travis is our manager for our Grow, Perform, and Succeed team. So let's start with recruitment, development, and retention. So when we think about this, we think about talent acquisition. How do we get top talent into this district where our kids and our families deserve to have the best people in front of them every single day? Whether it's serving food, whether it's protecting us through security, whether it's teaching or leading, we need the best people in front of us. So we have worked really hard on recruitment and talent acquisition. And during FY24, our Employee Care Center just across the hallway hosted over 6,000 customers that came in. And those are not only existing employees, but also volunteers, as well as potential employees. We saw a lot of potential people come through the Employee Care Center for help. So it's really a critical piece of what we do. In terms of recruiting, that's our fancy new human resources talent booth that we're taking on the road. But we've done a lot of recruiting events. So people have seen us out and about Cincinnati this whole summer, doing everything from walk-in Wednesdays here at the Ed Center, really focusing on teachers, substitute teachers, paraprofessionals, to booths at many local organizations and events throughout Cincinnati. We did this at the beginning of the year. We did 2 Parapalooza events to try to increase our number of paraprofessionals. We have coming up a student-teacher event because we know that a lot of new teachers find their way to jobs through student teaching and through early experiences in getting engaged with districts. And so we want to start that early, so we are going to be hosting student teachers in a couple weeks at Aiken. We have some other innovative ideas, Flip the Script Friday, so instead of us interviewing candidates, they can interview us and ask us about the district. So we have some really kind of cool things going on. We're excited about the Divine Nine networking event coming up at the end of the fall. And then, of course, in the spring, we'll do our Cincinnati Experience Weekend, and we're going to look at all the data to see what needs to be retooled, what needs to stay the same, what really works about that event. So lots going on in the recruiting. We are excited to introduce Jamie Pipkins also. She is our new Diversity Education Pathway Fellow. We all know that many of our employees represent the demographics of our students. However, that's not true in teaching, right? There's a huge gap between what our students look like and how they identify and how our teachers identify. And so what we're trying to do is really focus on the recruitment of underrepresented populations in the teaching force so that we look much more like our students. It's a lot of work. It's hard work. We're doing a pretty good job in Cincinnati Public, quite honestly. We're outpacing many of our colleagues, but we're not quite there yet. And so we worked really hard last year to write a grant, and we were able to work with Accelerate Great Schools to hire a 3-year targeted recruiting position, and that's Jamie. She is a Walnut Hills grad, and she's a UC alumnus, and she's very excited to be joining our team, and we are thrilled to have her. She's really taking recruiting in another way, so we're not just popping up a table and giving away tchotchkes, but we're really working through LinkedIn, and we're working on Indeed and all of those other platforms where recruiting looks much different than it did even just pre-COVID. And so we've got to keep up with the pace if we want to keep great people in our classrooms. Speaking of which, everybody doesn't decide when they're 18 they want to be a teacher, right? I did, but not many people did. And so what we see is that lots of people decide later in their career that they want to be a teacher. They decide, after I've done something else for a while, what I really always wanted to do is teach. But either someone said, don't do that, or there's not enough money in that, or for whatever reason, push them aside. So we're working really hard, again, on underrepresented populations and hard-to-staff licensure areas with a lot of our local universities. And we're working on alternate pathways. So we have lots of subs and paras and other folks in the district security guards even who are saying, I want to be a teacher, how can I do that? And so our team is really working on that, on those pathways to help people get plugged into not only coursework and not only accelerated programming, but also the dollars to support that. So it's great if a para wants to be a teacher, but if they can't afford to go back to school, it's all for naught. So we have to find the dollars to really support those people continuing their journey. Rolanda's group is also working really hard on reinstituting affinity groups. We had some semblance of affinity groups a few years ago, but we really want to start this in earnest. We know that one of the main things that determines whether you feel a part of his organization is if you have other people who are like you and other people who are thinking like you. And so we've really worked hard on thinking through affinity groups. What should they look like? What should they do? And so our first 3 groups that are going to get started are male teachers of color, our Latinx groups, and our LGBTQIA plus group. And we've already had people, as soon as we started talking about this, literally as soon as the same day, people have started approaching us and saying, I want to do that, I want to lead that, I'm interested in that work. So we want to get people connected. Connection means you retain, right? Retention means you don't have to recruit. Retention means that people love where they work, and that's what we want to do, is create an environment where people love to work here. So we are going to facilitate the logistics and help kick those groups off, but we won't lead them. They need to be led by the people that are in the groups. Next up, professional development. So also in this first lane is professional development. We know that we are well aware that you are aware that we had 2 big PD days at the beginning of this year, district-wide PD days. We also do lots of work under relicensure, document review. So teachers who are upgrading from a master's to a master's plus 30, master's plus 45, those sorts of things. All of that falls under our work. The science of reading training, many teachers did a lot of that work this year, so we're starting to get that paid out. But lots and lots of licensure work and work around upgrading professional development. And then we also offer online PD courses. So there are over 15,000 participants in PD courses that we've offered in the last year. Finally, just a little bit of a snapshot of some data. PD by the numbers. This year, we renewed 923 certificated licenses. So about a fifth, somewhere between 20 and 25% of teacher staff has to renew their license every 5 years, or every year. And so that's about that chunk. And then civil service permits, many of our civil service folks need to renew their license every year, or their permit every year. And so that for our team means a lot of communication, a lot of chasing, making sure people know what they need to do, lots of helping, assisting, after school activities, that sort of thing, to make sure that everybody is ready to start the year. Because if not, Mike and the rest of the Treasurer's Department will not pay them, and because we're not allowed to. And so we want to make sure that they are licensed and ready to start. Lots of PD, you can see, 159,000 plus contact hours earned by our staff last year, so lots. And then as we talked about, the PD on those first 2 days was about 2,500 people per day that we're planning PD for. Our next lane is staffing, and in terms of staffing, just to give you a quick snapshot of what our total employees look like, we've got about 6,500 total employees, and you know better than anyone that the biggest chunk of our money pays for people, right? In a school, that's true for every school district. And so what we want to do is make sure we have the best people for our folks, for our kids, for our families. And so we work really hard to make sure that it happens. And then once we've got them, we got to keep them. And so that's a lot of the work of staffing, is making sure people can get on board easily, make sure that they can get through to our department when they need help, et cetera. So you can see the breakdown of certificated civil service. Certificated, remember, includes all of our teachers, all of our principals, our building level staff, and then also substitute teachers, as well as any central office folks that fall on that certificated side, such as curriculum. Schedule E only would be people who are only coaching and not working for us otherwise, right? So I just coach bowling. I mean, I don't, but somebody does, only coaches bowling. Just as this kind of interesting data point, just to see when people apply. So as we think about coming up on this next year, we will have finished the implementation of our new unified talent. And as we look at FY26 applicants, this gives us a good snapshot on when we can expect most of our applications. So not surprisingly, they spike after transfer rounds are over and after kids graduate. So that's true. However, we also need to make sure we can get them before that so we can invite them to apply earlier. So what we'd like to do is move this whole graph to the left, and April should be like December, and start getting folks earlier and earlier, because it is a year-round situation. Last year, we had over 5,000 applicants, or applications from about 1,800 applicants. So what that means is that people applied for more than one job, right? So if I'm a fourth grade teacher, I might have a 4 to 9 teacher, I might have applied to every position that was open 4 to 9. So that gives us just a little idea about what the scale looks like in terms of our number of applications that we're reviewing. In terms of staffing, this is a picture actually from Walnut Hills High School this summer when we had all of our new teachers come to the new hire orientation or new hire induction. We had about 259 certificated new hires, and you can see the data there. And when we look at resignations versus new hires, that doesn't necessarily mean, like you're saying, why did we hire 259 and only 155 resign? That doesn't necessarily, remember, there's also retirements, and there's people that moved positions, et cetera. So you're not going to see a one-to-one match there. But I just thought it was interesting to kind of see during that same period of time, what's our resignations look like, and how do we go after those folks? If they were good people walking out the door, how do we stop them from walking out the door? What is our retention strategy? Because we always talk about recruiting, but what do we do actively to actively engage in retaining people? And so this year, we're really digging in to do some stay interviews and some things like that so that we can really figure out what causes someone to stay and what might cause that same person to leave. So without this support or without that piece, I might leave. But because you have that in place, I'm going to stay right here at Cincinnati Public. Lots of talk about substitute teachers. I know you guys get a call or two about that every now and then, about subs. So subs are tricky for us, right? They're essentially, they work every day, or they don't. They don't have to. So when we think about our teacher absences and our vacancy absences, we look at about a 2/3 overall fill rate. The part that you don't really see there, that's not as clear, is that fill rate is 100% at some schools. And guess what? At some schools, it's 0%. Right? So we've got to figure out how do we do a better job of making sure that we get subs where they're needed. And so we're doing some work around what does it look like to welcome a sub into your building? How do we treat people? How do we offer them a position? All of that. How can we make that just a little bit easier? Because it's not a money problem. We actually pay more than most other school districts do to sub. It's how do we create a culture where subs are welcomed and that they are valued because they're important. So this year, a little bit different. So we say all that, and then the sub-budget's a little bit tricky this year, as you know, because every school got a set allocation per pupil that pays for their daily subs. And then teachers, there's an MOU, as you know, that where the teachers can sub during their prep bell. That also comes out of their subline. So it used to come out of their ESSER dollars, but since we don't have that anymore. So we're really working hard to make sure that we're using paras appropriately and not using them as subs. We're working hard to make sure that our subs are being called and get noticed quickly enough and all of those pieces to really make this function well. On our Grow, Performance, Exceed team, a couple of pieces. This is a lot about performance management. You can see from the Ohio evaluation system is an online platform where we collect teacher evaluation data. We do over 3,000 evaluations. Most of them are classroom teachers. Obviously, some principals, counselors. ESP is educational service personnel, and those were just transitioned from paper records to online records, which is really critical because you'll see the data that shows completion rates. So when you have to have people do it on paper, they don't want to do it, right? So we got to make it easy. The highlights, from that work is that many more people completed their PGP, Professional Growth Plan, in those evaluation cycles all the way up to almost 100%. So 96.57%, that's pretty high relative to 64% the year before. So really making some gains and some strides in that evaluation data. And by putting those ESP evaluations on the Ohio ES platform, we really saw a huge increase in the number of completion rates. Not where we want it to be yet. 84% is not 100, but we're getting much, much closer. And so those allow us to set those goals that are really where we want to be for the benchmark. We want to continue, as we think through evaluation, we want to continue to link evaluation feedback to how do we develop people as educators and as employees. This is just one more slide on evaluation concerning how many evaluations we do, but there's, we do a lot, 6,000 evaluations, over 6,000 evaluations a year. The peer resistance and review program is where we take care of new teachers. So this is one retention strategy that is well-founded and well-researched, is as new teachers, the first question when we go to recruit teachers, the very first question they ever ask us is, how do you support your teachers? So district-wide mentors is an answer for that for us. And you can see that there's over 3,000 touch points with individual teachers with our district-wide mentors. 9 district-wide mentors, full-time out of classroom for 3 to 5 years is what they do. And if you can see that the difference, most of our new teachers, years 1 to 5 teachers, we have a retention rate of about 87%. If they worked with the district-wide mentor, it's almost 92%. That's significant. That's a lot less teachers to hire. And so that's why we really want to hone in on what are those skills, what is it that we need to do to make sure that support continues. In some schools, even where there are a lot of new teachers, they convened support groups right in those buildings, rather than having people come to the Ed Center or come to another spot. A couple of wins for this program this year is we rolled out a new program called Perform, which is our new online evaluation piece. And they just started newbie networking nights. And the first 2 were at a library where they got to learn how to use the makerspace and got to learn some new techniques and see how free and available those resources are. And then on Friday night, imagine a Friday night in October when you could have been anywhere else, and they were at Crayons to Computers this past Friday. So 30 teachers signed up to go to Crayons to Computers on a Friday night to learn about resources, free resources, and how to use those for their classroom. So that's the kind of energy that new teachers have that we have to capture and capitalize on to make sure they're still here in the coming days. All right, wrapping it up, total compensation, benefits. So Benefits has a new platform, as some of you know. We purchased Benefit Focus, who is our it's an online tool that will really improve the analytics and reporting for our benefits, and it will also make it really much easier for people to do open enrollment for that piece, which is coming up. Because of our new hires, we enrolled over 300 new employees in the month of August alone into benefits. We spend $72 million on benefits, so we want to make sure we do it right and do it well. And so some of you know, I know a couple of the board members are very familiar with the audit process and that benefits was audited, but we're making significant gains around that work based on the fact that we have a data analyst in place that really focuses on benefits and is looking at that data. In terms of numbers covered, we have 9,000 plus covered individuals. The Wellness Works program is really, we have a higher rate of participation in wellness than almost any other place does. And last year, Rolanda won an award in the whole state for the Wellness Champion. Internationally, I think. No, it was the state of Ohio for the wellness. So, because she really worked hard on that, and we continue to want to engage everyone in wellness because we know the healthier you are, the less you're going to need benefits, and the more you're going to be able to be at work, and it's just the right thing to do, right? We also know that a number of our employees, over 2,600, engaged in employee assistance program services. And that's very important also because when mental health crises come or financial crises or legal issues, we have services right at people's fingertips, and it's easy to access, and it's important work that they do. We were recognized as a gold level employer by the Healthy Business Council of Ohio, and we're also a finalist in the healthiest employer extra large category. That's the only extra large we want in the healthy category. It's the extra large size of the school district. So that's a lot. But as we think about what this year what comes into play for our department coming up, we've really bucketed our goals under 3 areas, and I've alluded to each one of these. The first one is recruitment. How do we more strategically increase the diversity of our teaching staff so it mirrors student demographics? That's really critically important to us. And so everybody's kind of gnawing on this from all different aspects, and we're sort of trying to do an all-in, like what is it going to take? So our recruiting team, which I'm so excited to say those words, recruiting team, has been working really hard and strong and smart about what are the partners that we can have around the city, around the state, around the nation who are doing this work, and who we could partner with to do this work, to really try to figure out how do you make teaching attractive, part of which is our schools have to be attractive to our students and they have to want to be there so they'll want to return. And so I think the work that everybody's doing across academics and curriculum and all of those are so important in deciding whether or not kids want to be teachers or not, quite frankly, having been a teacher for half my career here. We're also doing a little less exciting work, but super important work of standard operating procedures. So if you want to do a process in HR, there's a particular way to do it. It's not just, well, she does it this way, but he does it this way. We need to have a really strong set of standard operating procedures. And so we're doing that work. And then finally, how do we retain our staff? How do we focus on early career paraprofessionals and ensure that they can stay as a paraprofessional, or if they choose to want to better their career in terms of becoming a teacher or something like that, how do we help them to do that? Same thing with those year 1 to 5 teachers. How can I assure that that first year teacher is a face I'll still see in year 6 of their career? So that's where my goals are for the department. That's where our department goals are, my goals are, and then all of the managers and the administrators in our department have cascaded those goals down so that we can really see an influential change in the data that we have as we think forward to FY26. Thank you.
Thank you. Do members have questions, comments for this report? Yes, Dr. Moffett.
Real quick, that was a lot of information.
I know, sorry.
So, 2 things, kudos to you and the team. You all are doing a lot of work. And there's been a lot of transition, and you all are doing some great things. So thank you for all that you do. Suggestion, I was talking to some 28 to 33-year-olds about being subs that have just graduated, and some of the perceptions of our buildings are part of the problem. So to your slide, I wrote down slide 16, when you shared about getting some information out about the great things that subs can do, and it is great, but some of these young people don't want to go to some of our buildings because of the perceptions that they have. So I hope, and I know Catherine has also heard me say this, we have to get out the great stuff that's going on in our buildings so that it becomes attractive and that we have to be louder than the negative energy. So maybe that's also another reason why they're not being subs in some of our buildings that need them, that have the 100% rate that needs to be filled as well. So just wanted to put that out, just because I happened to have a conversation with some young adults, and they kept saying, I don't want to go over there. I don't want to go. I was like, well, but they need you. And so it was a challenge, and it should not have been. So giving you some advice.
Yeah, thank you. Totally agree with that. And I think some of it's in how we, yes, it's telling the good news for sure. It's also how do we welcome folks when they come to a building? And it's also how do we train people? So that you don't just say, well, I breathe and I have a degree, and so therefore I can be a sub. But how do we really actually bring people to the table and say, here's some requisite skills that will really help you when you walk into a classroom? And so we did some sub training last year that was very successful, and people gave us tons of feedback on it and that they really liked it. And so replicating some of that work I think is really important, because many of those subs will go on to matriculate into becoming a certified teacher if we set the table right. Right? It's about how do we welcome people and create an opportunity where they can see a career path.
Thank you. Madam Vice President?
Yes, I would just like to give you and your team a big round of applause really quick. Let's give them for their hard work. There are a couple of things that I just wanted to kind of give a little shout out to. talk about what I really liked and what I enjoyed with the presentation. So the retention piece for me is really big, especially as you're trying to keep our teachers and keep our staff. And so I think that that's very important, that you're trying to actually hear from the staff on why are they choosing to stay and also why are they choosing to leave. And I think that both of those things will definitely help as you're moving forward in terms of the retention piece. I also really appreciated the recruitment as a former teacher of the district. I like the fact of hearing that you're trying to increase the diversity of the teaching staff, especially since we are an urban district. I think that our students need to see all teachers are great. I love all the teachers, but I do think that we need to increase our minority teachers as well. And then the last piece, I really liked hearing about the improvement strategies. As board members, we get emails. We get emails of, this process is taking so long. Do they want to hire me? And I just remind them that you all are working very, very hard and they will get back to you. But I do think I like that you're trying to improve on the operating and also on the procedures. So thank you so much for sharing that as well.
Thank you, Vice President.
Mr. Craig?
So just three thoughts real quick, because I don't want to take a lot of time for this. First thought is, I think the most important thing that I found from your three goals was really the standing operating procedures, and I say that for a reason. It makes it really, really difficult with the amount of change that we've had in leadership, but also in the direction of HR since even I've been on the board, to manage and go through and do these regular tasks every year if someone does them different every year, right? And then that's a struggle. I know there's been a lot of change that's happened throughout HR over the last 3 years that I've been on the board. And even that way that HR operates and functions within the district is different than when the first day that I came onto the board. And so I know that that is a big part of, when we talk about it on audit committee all the time, if you don't have an operating procedure, there's nothing for us to then look at to see whether or not you're doing it right or whether or not it works. So I appreciate you all looking at that aspect. One aspect that I thought could be added into that, and that's probably not a goal for this fiscal year or even the immediately of this fiscal year to do it as a complete thing, but also looking at job descriptions. And I say that because we have a lot of positions, and we're doing it at my employer as well, where we're trying to go through and look at all 9,000 of our positions and see whether or not we actually have the right title for things. But one of the things that does concern me in some of our buildings is we have people in roles who are doing stuff that is not their role, and that it is a deterrent to someone who comes in and says, I want to work in this position, and they have me cutting the grass as opposed to doing this job, or they have me cleaning up the gym or the cafeteria as opposed to doing this work that others do. So I think that's one of the things also to just really look at is what are our position titles and those roles, so we can get at least a better idea of what people are supposed to be doing in some of these roles. The third thing, which I think is also just a conversation point that we've had as a board at least a few times that I've been on, is around professional development and kind of the role of professional development in the process of also making folks more accomplished and equipped to do their jobs. I know we've really struggled with that idea of how much professional development has actually grown a person's ability to go from this point A to point B. And maybe that's not necessarily the amount of professional development, maybe the types of professional development opportunities. Because I fight very hard for this as well, because I think there has to be a plan for succession and growth for an employee. A person who's a teacher may love teaching, but may someday want to be a principal. How do we take them from being a teacher to being a principal? Someone who's a principal may say, one day I would love to be a superintendent. What's the process of going from there? I think the same thing is true with our staff as well. If we're not making sure that we have employee development as part of that thought process with regard to professional development, it really is a way to really move someone from, they're going to stay in your district if they have opportunities to move up and they have opportunities to grow as a professional. So just wanted to hit those little 3 points real quick.
Thank you. Just a quick response. Dr. Smith and I were working together because we have this principal pipeline. And so how do you encourage, teachers who say, I want to be a principal? So looking at assistant principal and principal pipeline work as an example. And we are actually, as we are doing job descriptions now, as we roll them out, we're really taking with a much finer tip pen, and really looking at those and figuring out, is this really what we mean by this? Or is that really important anymore? Is that a post-COVID thing, or is that, so we are doing that work because I hear you loudly and clearly that some of them are old. And we just keep popping the same one out. And so rather than do that, as we're using job descriptions, we're really taking a look at that with our recruiting team particularly, is really looking at those job descriptions to make sure they look like templated, so they look like they came from CPS, so that they're the same, they look all the same, but also, more importantly, the verbiage in there is accurate to the job that we're really asking people to do. And I think that's critical, because it's a little hard to hold somebody accountable or support them if we don't know exactly what their job's supposed to do. So great point, thank you, very appreciate that.
Mr. Crossett?
Yeah, great presentation. I really like your organization with the 4
Thank you.
categories. I think that's a very good approach to HR. I was curious about on benefits. I know it's not one of your goals, but it might maybe be a sub-goal or something to drive costs down. Whether that is an improvement to competitive bidding or to however it might be, but that's a big area of cost that we can drive it down would help us, because as you know, budgets are tight. So I don't know if there's a goal that you can attach to that, but something to think about. The other thing, I know you're working hard on employee retention, and I think that's fantastic. It's really important, and I like the 1 to 5 year program. Do you have a employee turnover goal, or do you track the history of that year to year? I don't expect you to maybe answer that now, but that would be something to, and maybe categorize it by teachers and staff and that sort of thing. But I think some metrics around that would be interesting.
Yeah, I put the high level goal here. Actually, in the HR goal, there actually are the numbers, the metrics around that specifically. And so we do have that, and we can do year over year, in terms of what job classification is, because that's what we were paying attention to most, to figure out what groups of people we needed to start with for retention. Yeah. With regard to benefits, we're always thinking about and working on how better to both serve our population, but also to contain costs, because healthcare is so expensive. And as a self-pay organization, we see those costs, front and center. And so thinking about how do we, Wellness Works is an example of it. The more I am aware of my own data, the more I can take care of myself, and those kinds of pieces we're talking about growing out. But I hear you with respect to that. You can only go so far with that. How else do you look at other competitive options?
Yeah, get that wellness award in front of the carriers.
Yeah. They're aware. Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
Just a comment, just thank you for the presentation. I agree with Vice President Weinberg about really making sure that we're reflecting the diversity within our educators, because that really says a lot to have that representation. And I also just greatly appreciate how you all have been actively interfacing with the community. I love seeing you at the back to school event, and just having your entire team there and being present. That was really important, so thank you again.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
I want to second what Member Mapp said, and I feel this strongly about the HR folks, and I feel it strongly about the preschool folks too. The engagement and interaction with our groups like HR and preschool at these various community events it's remarkable, and I know how much time that takes, and I appreciate that, and I think you're right to mention that. Just a couple of things real quick, if I could. Headhunting. How can we support you in headhunting in these districts that may or may not be facing far more crucial financial issues than we are? I think that's very important. And you did mention briefly, and I think I don't know if it was, well, I guess it was sort of our relationship we once had with Mexico. and indeed having teachers from Mexico, and we did that particularly, it was a relationship we had with the State Department, and I don't know what works now, but I know that when we were really initially struck by incoming changes in our student population, when we really were not prepared. I mean, and it was some teachers and other folks, and also recognizing our changing personnel and changing student clientele as well. I have heard that there are programs regarding the State Department being interested in us having some sorts of relationships with a number of different African countries, and looking at our student population, even at my alma mater, it's becoming quite clear that it's an important relationship. And I know that there is interest, and I do know that we also have some, actually through Aiken, have some good contacts with the State Department. So I would really encourage those two things particularly. As spending my life in a small district, the real benefit of CPS is that you can stay in CPS and advance your career. If you're in a small district and you start as a teacher, unless you want to go to the dark side, as I call it, administration.
Hey.
That's the job you have. And you're in that room and you're in that building, and I thank God every day that I did 36 years doing that. But that's another thing that people have to understand about CPS. There are so many different ways to advance your career, change your career, and never leave CPS. And it's not just the administration, but it's the other support. And I really think we need, and I'm sure you do, because you've been an outstanding recruiter forever, but that is something we need to explain about CPS from an HR position, because most people don't fully understand how y'all have been doing this many years. So I appreciated this really good presentation, and whatever you can do at NKU, there's a brilliant president at NKU, absolutely brilliant president at NKU, I know, because she's one of my kids, and they are very interested in expanding their scope and doing stuff. I just worry about the reciprocity piece.
We can get there.
All right.
We can help them.
Great.
NKU, we actually have an accelerated bachelor's program for teaching, and so we just had a
Yes.
meeting with them this week about getting even more paras and long-term subs who are interested in going to a teaching pathway into that program, and how we can support that work. So people are thinking outside the box around that. And I know in terms of State Department, we've talked a lot about Puerto Rico as an option. Just doesn't require visas and some other pieces. So there are some options out there, but that is actually, when we think about diverse teacher pathway, we also think very specifically not only about African American teachers, but also about Latinx teachers, because our differential from student demographic to teachers is actually greater with Spanish-speaking population than it is even with our African American teaching population. That gap is wider, I should say.
And that came up in the superintendent's conversation last Tuesday too, even for our intervention or mental health service folks. Anyone, please understand, if you have that second language or it's your first language, you will be hired almost anywhere in America at this point in time and be stable. So that's another area to kind of fish the waters. Mr. Craig.
I just had a quick thought, and I don't know if we do it or not, so I just wanted to ask, do we do like informational videos as to how to get into, like how to get hired as a sub, how to go through the sub process? Because I do remember, when three of us joined the board, the big issue also was that we were coming out of COVID, and so folks didn't understand the process of how to become a sub, right? That you had to go through and submit one space, and then there were two different processes and all these kind of things. And so even maybe, I was thinking about this because the one thing that we heard a lot about with finance was the whiteboard videos were a great way for folks to be able to just show someone and send someone and say, here's just if you do a quick 2 or 3 minute informational video about how to become a sub, how to be a teacher, that's a really easy way also to share some of this information to President Bolton's point about building relationships up with other countries, or even like the benefits of being a teacher in CPS or something like that. That might be a cool, quick informational video. I hate to put more work on our communications and marketing folks, but I think this is just something down the line. It might be a great way to do some of the recruitment you're thinking about.
Yeah, thank you. That's a fantastic idea that we'll work with Marcom on. And we do a lot of videos, mostly internal processes for other folks who are working with us or interdepartmental kinds of things. But I really am a fan of doing a short snippet that kind of wets your whistle for the next piece. So I think that's a fantastic idea that I don't think would be over the moon to implement at all.
I promise this is the last comment I have. Last week I was reminded when the treasurer and the superintendent and I went to, and the president of CFT went to an event, a sad event, but it was for a family member of Melody Dacey. And having been here 17 years, and I can tell you that there are internal mentors, not people that get an extra stipend to do it, but people that are within the system that have wisdom to share, that are trusted. And I know that in small organizations, that those people are very much loved and encouraged and what have you. In large organizations, they're even more crucial. I can think of 12 principals that I know at CPS that would say to you they became great principals because of Melody Dacey. And there's got to be some effort out there to get those folks able to talk to our talk about recruiting. The best thing for recruiting is not just a good building and kids that might actually behave and want to learn, but it's having great colleagues, and it's also having somebody to trust in those early years. So just kind of thinking about that.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Thank you very much. This is a great report.
Thank you. Thanks.
So Director Indelay told us about our great staff and how we're going to do even a better job of recruiting and retaining. And so we're recruiting and retaining them to building changes and program changes. And with that, Assistant Superintendent Chambers and our CIO Gallahue will come forward to talk to you about where we are with our growth plan phase 2. And I think that you know that this was really driven out of looking at our operations, looking at our fiscal status, but really the heart of what we are putting together is really centered around innovation and keeping in mind our whole students when it comes to providing them with the best outcomes possible. So I'll turn it over to them.
Good evening, Board President Bolton, Vice President Weinberg, members of the board, Interim Superintendent Murphy, and Assistant Treasurer Guston. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to present on our growth plan phase 2. The objective and the mission of our growth plan phase 2 is to foster growth within the district and beyond, to ensure our schools are populated with the appropriate number of students of diverse economic backgrounds, and to align school communities with authentic neighborhood identities. And to achieve this, we will optimize both operations and learning environments by moving forward with establishing new junior high schools and middle schools. And in doing so, we will recognize CPS's traditional West and East geographic divisions and incorporate 3 new North to South corridors for West, Central, and East designations.
So the next few slides will be familiar to the majority of the board as well as to the public. We've looked at a few of these in the past, but we thought it really important that we bring these up again as not just a recap so that we can see what the overall implementation of the corridor model looks like that we've been discussing, but also to be able to call out that as we look across the corridors as well as internal to each of those corridors, it provides us with a really strong pillar for how our perspective is framed around realigning the various aspects of the district for our growth plan. So across those aspects, we're looking at the grade band configurations, our boundaries, our service offerings, and our programming availability and access. On the following 3 slides, you'll see some further details around each of those corridors. You'll see the boundaries that represent the corridor, the schools within each of the corridors, the grade band configuration that the school currently has, the enrollment, the FMP rated capacity, as well as the utilization. And as was alluded to earlier, with all of the implications that may fall in, the important takeaway as we look across this is to note the disparity in the utilization of our buildings. We certainly see a pretty great swing from our lowest numbers, which could be ranging between 30 and 40%, to our highest, which are consistently in our high schools at 100, 110, 120%. That includes if we look at the West Corridor, despite it being even our highest average utilization percentage, it, even within that corridor, has opportunities to be able to realign and more efficiently utilize the capacity that we already have. The second goal that we need to look at is how that we move that capacity from where we have it within the district towards where we need it. Next one. In doing that, we not only look at the utilization numbers and the disparities that we have available, but we also look at the location, the proximity of schools to each other and to multiple other schools, the economic diversity, the neighborhood boundary authenticity, and the healthy enrollment that we need at each of our buildings to be able to build some projection as to what we see the neighborhood and, pardon me, the neighborhood grade band configurations that we would be able to propose to best serve our students and families within each of those corridors. In the elementary band, we would be looking at a number of configurations ranging from pre-K through 5, pre-K through 6, and pre-K through 8. Next would be our middle school and junior high school grade bands. So across the various instances that we looked at, there are a number of situations to where some areas would be better served with specific grade bands and others would be better served by a different grade band. This is one of those cases that would allow us to realign that capacity to alleviate some of our overcrowding while promoting some of our underutilized buildings significantly. And being able to utilize both a middle school model where we have a 6, 7, and 8 grade band, some junior high schools where we would have a 7th and 8th grade band, and there may even be an isolated incident or two where we would be best served by using looking at a 5, 6, 7, 8 grade band. Looking at our high schools, we see that the vast majority would be best served by the 9 to 12 grade band configuration. But that doesn't eliminate what we have seen as some successful models around the K-12 or the potential of needing future K-12 implementations, or the possibility of needing to maintain a 7-12 configuration in each of the corridors for a variety of options. So we've looked at grade bands and healthy enrollment, but the flip side of that coin, which is equally important, if not even more so, are the service offerings and the programmatic access that we need and the opportunities we want to develop.
And with that, we are proposing that we have 3 new welcome centers that will be strategically located in areas where there's a high MLL population. And these schools will be Hartwell, Roberts, and Dater High School. And when we're looking at our programmatic focus proposals, we're looking to offer additional IB programming, early college, expansion of the access to the Zoo Academy, a Montessori middle school, and a creation of an autism center, And then we're looking at centralizing the enrollment. That would make that process a lot easier for our families. And we're also looking at what we refer to affectionately as the WRAP. And the WRAP is a concept that we're looking at is to provide services for our families that are experiencing homelessness. There will be a variety of things that we would offer those families to help them as they're trying to transition from that homelessness to finding some permanent housing. And we're looking to reimagine our digital learning opportunities for our students and expanding on our CTE programming with automotive, cosmetology, and entrepreneurship. And we're also looking to expand our public safety programs. And we would also offer a junior ROTC program, both in the Navy and the Air Force, offering programs in the humanities and the social sciences. And we're looking at, we're in the process of reviewing locations for our specialized classrooms. So we're proposing that, like last year when we eliminated the magnet status for Covedale, Mount Washington, and Silverton, with doing the same for College Hill, Taft Elementary, and Woodford.
In addition to the specific opportunities we're looking to design within Phase 2, we also have to look at the foundations we're laying in Phase 2 for what happens beyond there in preparing the district for our next phase. With that, there's a list of properties that the district currently has that represent a combination of opportunities for us, including things like Q's Annex, which has a great opportunity for a renovation space. There are ones that have combinations of possible renovation or new construction, such as Gamble High School's campus, the Jacobs Center property, the very large High Knoll property. There's also a number of schools, small number, that as we look at the Phase 2 and beyond, we can see that even with the realignments that we're looking at potentially doing, there's going to be continued growth, and they're going to need additional space. It's not exclusive, but Kansas is a great example of that, where we may need additional capacity that could be represented through a combination of renovation, addition, new construction, or even partnerships with third parties as to be able to provide additional space that we could utilize or better use our space along with their services. There's also a number of properties that we have that could be considered as both construction or sales property, or even potentially exchange or swap. Things like the Burton property, the Digby property, and of course we always have to continue our evaluation of our administrative building footprint for the education center and our Iowan facilities to make sure it's best serving our needs as a district. So with all of those aspects covered, we're largely looking at, pardon me, I'm getting choked up. We are really looking at, or we're really excited to be able to get back to the next part of our presentation towards the end of this month, where we can delve a little deeper into some of the detailed best thoughts of administration. Thank you. Best thoughts of administration. And we can really frame up how all of these pieces coalesce together to create a strong framework that goes hand in hand with the engagement that's been happening and will continue to happen going forward with those best thoughts, so that we can really provide the best plan for the district. Can't mention engagement without calling out, and we wanted to provide, this is some of the upcoming engagement opportunities for this month. This is not an exhaustive list by any means. If you want to see what has already taken place, the link at the bottom is a calendar which will provide you with all of the sessions that have already happened, as well as more sessions that will be completed this month and next. And with that, we are happy to answer any questions.
Any folks have questions for this very high-level approach to Phase 2? Mr. Craig.
So again, thank you both for this presentation. And I just have a couple of questions that I kind of want to get a little bit better idea of. One of the things is, and I've said this a lot, so I probably am just going to repeat myself a lot with this regard, but we see population changes in our city, and when I get it, like a lot of folks think that, oh, that just means people are moving to one area, or this will be that. Population changes happen in patterns. So we can make a lot of investments into one side of our city, and then in 10 years from now, that side of the city can no longer have kids. And another part of the city now has a bunch of kids growing, and that's just been how we've seen that. And so the one concern I have thinking about anytime we do any kind of plan in that sense is to create space, yes, on the west side of town where we see a larger population right now, but also recognizing the need for, if we're gonna make changes to something, that it reflects the potential population changes that may happen for other parts of our city. And so that's one of the things I raises a little bit of a thought process for us to be continuously thinking about, because I know, for instance, there are neighborhoods where, like Avondale, Bond Hill, where we thought there would forever be people populating those areas in the same masses. And they made an entire change to how that area looks, breathes, housing costs, all these other factors that have had a large effect on the population that are outside of our control. And so I think that's just one of those things that we have to be cognizant of. The second thing I wanted to kind of raise as a thought, and I think this is one of the things that I appreciate about giving the number of enrollment versus capacity, is because I think we have certain buildings that absolutely we can rethink about how we want to do it, but the reality is that we're not going to buy a bunch of properties anytime soon, as far as I know, because unless we got some mysterious donor that's offering out, which if we do, please give more. But in some of these ways, we're talking about rethinking how we're populating those schools. And the concern I have is a twofold. One is just how much of that is a change that we're going to do right away, how much of that is a change we're phasing in, how much of that is a conversation. But two, how much will that have an effect on whether or not someone, maybe, for instance, if you change the school to add in 7th and 8th grade there may be a parent who says, I wasn't originally going to send my kid to 7th and 8th grade in CPS because they were going to end up at a high school, but now I'm going to. That could expand the population that needs capacity for. And so I'm also very, I think we have to be very cognizant of that and be paying attention to that as we make those changes. I think that's a factor that I was thinking about as you all were talking about, because I can look at, for instance, Gamble Elementary has capacity to add more students in theory. So if we even, in theory, if you expanded that to 7th, 8th grade, well, now maybe that changed the whole game for a bunch of folks who said, oh, well, let me bring my kid back to 7th and 8th grade Montessori. Right? That may then make that overcapacity. And now we're talking about Gamble having, 104% as opposed to 90% capacity, right? The third thing and again, I'll just try and keep it brief here. The third thought that I had with all of this is really going back to, I want us to be really thoughtful and considerate of those folks who are affected by any of these types of changes. And I say that because I'm listening to one of our speakers who came in today, Mr. Sutton, who quite honestly wants to know what's going on. They want to be part of the conversation. We made a number of changes, and we saw it in messages we received, but we see it also in the public messages that were received at our meetings, that the folks want to know what's happening and be a part of those conversations more. And I think if we are not doing that in a thoughtful way and doing it in a maybe more slower tempo, but still paying attention to that, then we're going to lose the support of a lot of the folks who we're actually asking to be on our side. And so I'm just a little worried on some of the ideas of doing a lot of changes to buildings and a lot of instructions that we're going to be starting a bunch of projects that then we may not see the benefit of, because there may not be the same support for it if it affects teachers' numbers, if it affects where students can go for a period of time, if it affects where their kids are attending now. Because I do think that had an effect this year, because some folks did not want to be connected, did not have the means to go to certain spaces, or did not have the capacity to do certain things. And so I just am very cautious about those type of things that affect a large group of people.
Thank you, Mr. Craig.
Thank you for that. I would like to
Sure.
address Board Member Craig for just a second. And the purpose of our early engagement sessions, we initially met with the principals, and we're having engagement sessions with the LSDMCs. It was to not do that, right? We wanted to meet with the leadership of the school to let them know that their school's being considered in phase two. And, and number two is to give the school communities the opportunity to give us feedback on what they believe are either barriers to their enrollment and what would they like to see as they re-envision how their school looks in this phase two process. So those sessions are are ongoing. They've been really going since late August. And as you can see from the October engagement calendar, we're going to ensure that we engage every school leadership group and the greater school community to, as we get more solid details on how it will look for the individual schools, we'll go back and have sessions, engagement sessions with those school communities to say, okay, now this is the proposal for you. How is that going to look, and how can you help us reimagine how this is going to look for your school community? So, we are very aware and cognizant of not having that perception that the school community is not engaged. We do not want to give the impression that this is going to be a top-down. This is going to be a bottom-up. We want them to be involved in this process as we move along and to be totally engaged and on board with the decisions for those schools.
Vice President Weinberg.
Thank you so much for restating that. Mr. Wilson, can you put up the slide with the dates? I just want to thank Board Member Craig, because for me, I know when I ran on transparency and communication, and this is very big for some of our community members that are sitting in the audience or are listening. Parents want to be involved, community members want to be involved, and I think that it's great that we have these dates, so the dates are here. I encourage everyone to pass it along to a friend, a community member, a neighbor, and come out in numbers so that they can hear your voice, because your voice is important. And I just want you all to remember, as you're going on through this process as well, thank you for saying that their voice matters, because I think that is a big concern.
Absolutely.
Other questions, comments? Dr. Moffitt?
So thank you for the presentation. This is much different than what we've had before. So I really appreciate in that the timing is, we've got time to do this. A couple of comments regarding some of the information that you shared, and I want to just make sure that I say it publicly, because I was on a call with the superintendent in the city, and some of those same questions have been asked, so I want to make sure that I say it. So the superintendent, I shared with her some of my concerns around some schools and some gentrification that was going on. And I do know that you all are interested in and going to proceed with looking at how the impact that you're proposing does impact the city and the community. More specifically, like CMHA housing for some of our communities. How does some of the proposals that you're talking about with regard to middle school and our current enrollment and capacity, how is that impacted, to Board Member Craig's point, around what the community could look like in 5 to 10 years? So you didn't share that this time, but I know it's coming because you shared that before. So I want to make sure that we say that publicly, that we are taking some of those considerations into the reflection around some of the proposals, recognizing that the city is being gentrified. Some of these communities within the corridors that we're speaking of are definitely being gentrified as well. I want to go back to slide, slide 5, where it says West Corridor, and just kind of sit there for a minute. You all went there through the corridor model, and I appreciate that map. And we did agree as a board to do the corridors, I think last year or maybe this year. So this definitely aligns with what we were thinking. But the capacity there is just ginormous. Are you all planning on redoing some of the boundary lines there? What's that process looking like? Because we found this in ad hoc, but it's demonstrative here that the capacity of the buildings on the west side are just really, really large. What's the plan with regard to implementation of middle schools or consideration of middle schools and redrawing some of those boundary lines? I've got a bunch of questions, but that's the first one. Do you want me to give you all the questions first, or just go? Okay, one at a time, I got you. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think without going into great detail as to this school or that school for any specifics, I do believe really at the root of the question is from the west side, we do believe there are opportunities to address some of the capacity issues and some of that utilization through the movement of boundary lines, as well as we do believe there is an opportunity or a space there to where a middle school or a junior high could exist on the west side as well.
Gotcha. And then if we go to the next slide, Rob, I just want to kind of stay on exposing to the community. And these slides are available on the public, just in case you all want to know that the central corridor, we've looked at this regarding the ad hoc data on building utilization, and we've got some buildings that are not utilized, and we've got some buildings that are over capacity. And then go to the next slide, Rob, with regard to the east. And I just wanted to show, this is in part what we looked at with regard to ad hoc and why we needed to do that. I appreciate you all not getting in front of the board. We've got a lot of rumors, a lot of just conversation going around. And I also appreciate the effort in trying really hard to work with the building administration, work with our staff to see first what their temperament is. And I've heard from some staff members like, you know what? Hey, we talked about it. They're coming to my LSDMC. They're talking to us first. But that is how I think it should be. It should be organic and it should be like that. So I really do want to appreciate that. I also want to say, well, two more things. We heard from CFT President Sellers around House Bill 308 and how that could impact us adversely. We also have on the books under Ohio Revised Code how we really we can't close buildings and let them just sit. So now we've had there is a revised code that says that you can't have a building just sit without having to sell it for a year. And now they're coming at us from the opposite end to say, hey, you got a building that's less than utilized, we're gonna force you to close it. So we have to do some things differently, and that's the point. And that's why I'm staying on here, is because I think Board Member Craig shared, we want to make sure everyone is on board. Someone shared, we want to make sure everyone is on board. But I also want to point out that on board does not equal agree all the time. And so we have to do some things differently. I appreciate this. The last question I want to ask is, you all are going out and engaging with LSDMCs, PTOs, and administration. Are we collecting that data around what they're saying that they want, whether quantitatively or qualitatively? Are you all able to say, hey, we surveyed 50 parents or 50 LSDMCs and the administration said this and the parents said that? Are you all collecting that in any way?
We're collecting feedback from them and just through the notes that I take at the meetings that express the LSDMC, their suggestions, recommendations, concerns. So as we're continuing to formulate the final product, we can take all of those recommendations in mind. We're also looking, as the plan gets more formalized, is to start the survey process, because at that point they'll have something to answer back to as far as some questions and some answers as far as what they see as the right fit for their building.
If it is at all possible, if we could collect it, either you transcribe it or they submit it, because what I don't want to happen is they say, oh, we never said that. So if we could just get something, we don't have to get it as a board, but if you all could collect some data that they submitted to say, I heard the presentation, this was my feedback around it, and then we could regurgitate that back if we needed to, in reflection of what the building administration and the LSDMC said that they wanted. I think that'd be helpful.
Absolutely.
Not to prove or disprove, but to really reflect what they asked for. That would be most helpful. And then the only other thing that I want to ask is, I know I said one more question, but community councils. We've got a lot of community councils that have asked us to be engaged, and then we've got some that didn't ask us at all, but they should be. And so are we intentionally engaging community council?
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to those meetings as well. Okay, great. Thank you.
Other questions from board members? The Vice President has a correction regarding the number of the law.
Yes, so for that Senate bill, it's 295, correct? 295, not 308 or whatever was said before, it's 295. So for the record, we should have the correct number. 295.
My apologies, House Bill or Senate Bill 295.
Do we have the right number? Mr. Crossett?
So I just have a couple comments. Great effort, really interesting process that you guys are going through, and I appreciate it. I know it's a lot of work. It seems to me like whatever you're doing now probably needs to be done continuously in the future. So hopefully you can build that in. Also, just in case you aren't using it, there's some other resources that you might be able to use, like the Economics Center at UC, the City of Cincinnati, the Port Authority. They probably have a lot of information about where population is going to be growing and shrinking. So if you're not using those, I just suggest you tap in. And if you need help connecting, I can connect you. The last thing I wanted to talk about was possibly could you expand the scope of what you do to incorporate the capacity and utilization of school buildings in neighboring school districts? A neighboring school district might have a problem that we can solve, or vice versa. Something to think about, maybe. Or an adjacent, physically, geographically adjacent, something to think about.
Thank you, Mr. Crossett. Member Mapp? Okay, I appreciate the presentation. I think the hard thing about all of this is that got people concerned initially was that we had to get started quickly, or we would lose a year. If you all hadn't done what you did in that horrible, rapid time for people, that people had to be pretty good sports to do it, we would lose a year. I've been putting together an agenda for the board retreat this October, and went back and we started talking about the corridors 5 years ago. It is great to see this happening because it's so important that everybody in the city, in our district, have the similar choices. And the corridors allow that to happen, that we could financially sustain it. Because if you're going to have this in that corridor, you're going to have this in the same corridor and this whatever. So there's reasons for that. The problem is, unless we do this big picture, not just the high-level picture, but the broad, comprehensive picture, people really don't understand what we're trying to do. But we can't do the giant big picture without the piecemeal engagement. But then with piecemeal engagement, just like people hearing something about TAC, because we're being transparent, it's not a final decision yet, but we're sharing, and then people lose their minds, properly so. But you're going to have to figure out a balance between the sharing of the big picture and why we're doing all of this, and probably how it's going to be. And these are the reasons, whether it's the state government telling us about buildings, or whether it's Fordham Foundation telling us what we should and shouldn't do. We had the same situation with the FMP. The FMP had years of broad and then specific engagement, but people saw a big picture. So, and we have to remember that when we started the FMP 20-some years ago, the state of Ohio said that the school district of Greater Cincinnati was going to have, if they were lucky, they would have 24 or 25,000 students, if they were lucky. The migration out of the city core west, particularly by African-American folks, people knew that was going to happen. But the pressures were so great politically that you didn't necessarily design the FMP around it. people did not know the incoming migration, if you will, of immigrants. That was not foreseen. But the movement out of the city core by African-American folks, not just going up the central corridor to Forest Park and beyond, but going west because the west had shut down for 8 generations and not allowed integration of the west side of town. And then all of a sudden, it had to be done. So these migration, these population changes, we have to do something that is universal and very flexible, because we have to design something. And finally, this is my big bugaboo now because of the state of Ohio. We have surrounding districts that are not going to survive because of the funding of our schools. And we might be last man standing. And that reality has to sink in when we start talking about open enrollment, start talking about offering the seats where people want to go to school, expanding those seats because it's a marketplace. So these are just huge, big, exciting things as we totally redesign the district. And I'm excited about it. And I think we've got good folks trying to work through it. And there's been plenty of development of this effort. Any other, Member Matt, did I give you enough time?
Yes, I'm trying to formulate it. Hopefully,
Appreciate it.
I gather all my thoughts. But I am curious, did you all share when the projected timeline is for possible implementation of this, if this is something that's approved?
I believe we would say next school year for the vast majority of everything that we're looking at in phase 2 specifically.
Okay, because I do recall at the previous, thank you for clarifying that. I think at a previous meeting, I know Mr. Chambers spoke about it happening rather swiftly. Was that the engagement piece or the implementation piece?
Well, I was speaking in like school terms. When you're in the building, it seems like a month is like 4 months, right? So in school terms, it's going to happen relatively quickly. But we're looking to have full implementation by the beginning of the next school year.
Okay. My other question is, have we considered, I know that we're gathering information, gathering feedback through engagement processes. Has there been some type of, assessment or evaluation about what this could potentially cost? I know you talked about that there's room for renovation in new construction in particular buildings. Has there been kind of an assessment of that, or can you give us an idea? Because how I'm seeing the presentation it is very high level, and so just wanting some more details and specifics around it.
There has been. At this point, I would be hesitant to give numbers again until when we get into the deeper detailed presentation around the construction especially. There's been a lot of investigation as to what the price or the cost could be for those various renovations and building. Overall, for phase 2, our goal and intent is to be as budget neutral as possible. Looking at offsetting costs with incurred costs, that is our goal. I'm not saying that we can guarantee we're going to get there, but that is the goal.
Okay. And when will we have access to what the previous changes were? I don't think we ever received that feedback in terms of the Riverview and Spencer, those financial dollars. How were those allocated? Do we receive an update about that?
We can bring that the 28th.
Okay, that would be greatly appreciated. And then, again, I know that we're looking at innovation. I know that this is something that we need to do in terms of the utilization of our schools and the capacity, but I am still concerned about potential displacement and things that maybe we're not possibly accounting for. So I just look forward to hearing that further conversation about, how we effectively consider all aspects in the planning phase, and that there can be more specifics and language around that, and just more of a timeline as to what this could possibly look like.
I think those are good requests. And I think we could be thinking too is that We have both the retreat this month, and we have another board meeting this month. Is there also, is there a committee of the whole as well? But we've been doing other stuff as that. So this is very intense right now. And I appreciate the work that everybody's doing. Because this is to hear from the treasurer, if I recall, this has to impact what we do for the fiscal 2026. I mean, so, you know, we're gonna, it's just very pressure from that standpoint. Mr. Craig, Finance Chair.
Yeah, I just wanted to hit two quick things, and one of them is tapping right into that idea. I worry one concern with regards to any major renovations projects is, so one, we don't have money, but two, there's an equitable lens to this when we know that there are other things within some of our buildings that need to be done that we also have no money for, but that we're going to potentially ask folks to provide us additional financial assistance. And so I do, like, I understand why we might need it in some ways, in the capacity needs that some of our buildings have. What I am concerned about at times is that we look like we are providing resources to one group of people, and to others, we are saying, you have to wait for your building because we ain't ready yet, right? And that has a lens to it. And I speak that also because I think sometimes we have engagement conversations that end up looking that way as well. Right, where for one group of people, we're saying, we're giving you something. And the other group, we're kind of saying, well, like, it's still gonna be okay. Like, we're still gonna work with you, right? And like, it feels very different to those folks. The second part, and this will probably tap a little bit into our larger discussion around our budget, is that programmatic needs throughout our city are very different. And we know that, for instance, on the west side of town, they may have certain beneficial needs and programs that they like and benefit from. And, you know, on the east corridor, they may have programs and things that they're more used to doing and benefit from, and same deal for Central. And I want to make sure, because I love the idea of, for instance, expanding out opportunities to do things like expanding career tech, although I'm sure the treasurer right now would be telling me, but with dollars from somewhere, right? Like, but I want to make sure also that we, for our elementary education opportunities for programmatic needs, that we're paying attention to that too. Because I think we sometimes talk about programmatic needs from a high school level or Montessori or like that level. And realistically, there are many other programs within our schools. And I look at, for instance, the work that like Project Connect does within some of the schools. They have greater need on one side of town right now, right? Our MLL students have a greater need of those programmatic services on one side of town. And I just want us to make sure we're paying attention to the equity of that as well. Because I do think if we get to a point where we're saying we have to do the same, we may not have the resources or needs to do both. But if we are paying attention to the resources, the needs, the things that are there, we might find out that there are a little less stuff we might do within the plan of growth that will have the same, or if not a better beneficial effect for those students. I like for instance, the Welcome Centers is a great example of that. We may not need a Welcome Center on all parts of the district, but we especially need a Welcome Center for our MLL students on the west side of town, because that's where they're being housed currently.
To piggyback on that, I would say from the facilities master plan, which was remarkably successful, $1.2 billion, almost 80% local dollars. We will be paying that off within, 2031, 32, something like that, Assistant Treasurer, which is remarkable. That's part of the messaging for folks. But also, we learned with the FMP exactly the point that you're making. What was the first school that was built? Woodward. Why? Because people wondered if only a certain number of people or certain types of our clientele was going to be taken care of. And when you get a cans, you better have a leap. So these are all things that have to be considered. That's part of the messaging, that's part of the sharing, for real. Great report. Another good one. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry.
No problem. Just a follow-up question around the engagement piece. When can we begin to possibly expect those, that information to be shared out to not just only us as a board, but also to the public? So I know that you've already had certain engagement meetings at different schools, and we have the list of engagement opportunities that are coming up. When can the public begin to be informed about just those overall conversations and what were included in that discussion?
I do believe these are on the website or in the process of being on the website. And then in addition to these school, community-specific things, we'll have more at-large pieces to add to this list. So we are working with our communications team.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments as we move on? Thank you, thank you. Could I make a statement? No. If we go further, if we can, we'll talk to you in just a bit, but if we can do this next presentation. And it was supposed to be the treasurer, but the finance chair has asked us to.
So this is going to be really brief. We actually covered this in budget and finance, but I think it's something that'll be part of the discussion that we will have on the 26th, which is our kind of group or discussion. One of the suggestions from the treasurer was revisiting budget categories for our discussion, and so that we can better understand where do our dollars fit into, where do those, what is part of like discretionary costs versus what are core operational costs. These types of things, so we better understand how we're allocating those dollars currently, and then also any proposed allocations. And so the treasurer and the interim superintendent and I met, and we kind of discussed bringing a member of the instructional staff onto the conversation. There's members of the treasurer's team that are part of that conversation to really holistically look at where those categories should look like, so we have a better understanding. I don't know, Mike, if you have any additional comments onto that?
No, I think you covered it pretty well. We did actually also add the internal audit executive as a kind of a neutral third party to that discussion,
So that's really the only update, was just to add to that, was something we wanted to bring to the focus of the board on the 26th, whatever that Saturday is just to make sure that we are talking about categories of how our spending is, so we better understand what is stuff we cannot not spend versus stuff that we actually have the discretion to spend.
Thank you, and that's the budget piece, and so we're anticipating that some part of the retreat will be spent on budget, is that?
That was the hope, yes.
That was the hope, okay. I think that makes sense for us to be able to do that. If we could have, if it's all right with you, Superintendent, I know you were going to present the update, which was an assignment to the administration regarding the work on a foundation. And why don't we slip this in here, and if it's okay with you, for general counsel to present?
Absolutely.
Great.
Thank you. Good evening. At the September 23rd meeting, the board requested the administration to consider various options for a CPS foundation and to report back with a recommendation. Education foundations are created as a way for school districts to receive and distribute funds to augment, supplement, enhance public funding, public resources. And there were really two options available to school districts. One, under Ohio law, a district can create its own fund under the control of the board, maintained by the district's treasurer. And while donations directly to the district will always be welcomed, a district-controlled foundation, we think, does not present new opportunities for generating revenues. Some donors will always seek out or be more comfortable giving to an independent foundation that supports CPS students as opposed to making donations directly to the district itself. Moreover, board-controlled foundations are subject to all the same restrictions that the district is for expending funds, investing funds, et cetera. So That leads us to, I think, the administration's recommendation, the second option, which is for CPS to work with an independent education foundation. An independent foundation would be, again, an Ohio nonprofit corporation organized under 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code, making it tax deductible, or donations to the organization would be tax deductible. And while CPS could start its own foundation or a new one, I think our recommendation, the administration recommendation would, and first choice would be to work with CPS's existing partner, ABC, Activities Beyond the Classroom. ABC's been in existence since December of 2003 and always has had as a primary purpose to raise money to support and promote the welfare of the children and the staff of Cincinnati Public Schools. For more than 20 years, ABC and CPS have partnered to expand athletic and extracurricular activities, to promote music and the arts, to coordinate resources that are available for CPS students. Importantly, ABC already serves as the fiscal agent for more than 100 CPS organizations, teams, classrooms, and other groups. These are funds that are raised by cheerleading teams and bands and Project Connect that serves our district's homeless population. If the board agrees, our recommendation would be for CPS to work with ABC to develop an MOU that would create this framework for a renewed relationship with ABC serving as our foundation. Some issues that would be considered in the MOU would include the types of funds and fundraisers that would be directed to a foundation versus the types of funds that still need to remain with CPS. An example, ticket sales have to be deposited with the district. They can't be directed to a foundation. Also, the rules that would apply to the expenditure of foundation funds. I think something important to the district, the board, the treasurer's office would be, in general, we would not want the foundation to be a way of circumventing CPS's expenditure rules. Finally, there needs to be a discussion about the administrative costs and expenditures that are involved in running the foundation, as well as with ABC, the purchase services that CPS is already partnering with ABC to provide. So athletic directors, resource coordinators, what will the future of those purchase services be in light of this sort of renewed purpose? So the administration would be pleased to open those discussions with ABC and work on getting together a memorandum of understanding that could be presented and approved by both boards. Welcome your questions.
Questions? Mr. Craig?
So my one question is the same question I asked, and we talked about this last time, which is that I have just issues where this, to me, feels like a conflict of interest to both be a vendor and be the entity that would be providing the foundation services. And so there's a concern with me of how we change that, or how we address that, or how that is addressed within any agreement. Because again, there's an implication, even if it's not an actual thing, but a potential idea that, are you more likely to generate funds and programming for those services for which you have someone that's employed underneath you providing, i.e. you're more likely to help out a particular school, sports team, or particular programs that you're more connected with based on who you're staffing the district with. And so those things are things to me that would be of concern, that would be potential ethical implications. I think the general work and the great things that ABC has done to connect our students to opportunities within the arts and athletics has been tremendous. But I, again, worry about how this would look to others who also provide some of those same services, i.e., for instance, resource coordinators who are not provided through ABC. How would their resources and their interests at their particular schools be considered or viewed in light of there being that vendor relationship? So
important things to go through.
Noted, that's right, yes.
Other questions, comments? Dr. Moffett?
So I don't know what the timeline is, because that wasn't very clear to me. I'm open for discussion for this potentially for next school year or for next, I don't know what the fiscal year is that we're talking about. But what I would like to see is clear delineation of if we were to remove the money that we are paying for them, how are they going to sustain themselves? And then
Right.
who is going to pay for resource coordination? You know, I am a little aligned with Board Member Craig around clear understanding of separating the lines. So when you talk about what are the current admin costs to run, it can't be, to me, current admin costs and you're getting resource coordination. So they need to come up with a plan. What I would love to see is a plan for them without CPS, resource coordination and athletic, all of that separate. What is their plan for a foundation? And then if they were to add admin costs, that's great. But that, to me, I envision a foundation for CPS being a little bit more self-sustaining than to be fiscally attached as much as ABC is to CPS. So I think that it's a viable idea. I do think that I'd like to see a little bit more information around what it looks like. If ABC is a completely independent agency, then they should be independent and void of us financially, and what does that look like? And then we draft an MOU coming back from that. So I don't think that we're at that point to draft an MOU because I don't have enough information in writing. Maybe it's there. When is the fiscal year going to start? If we draft an MOU, is that effective?
June 30th is the.
Well, I don't have enough in writing, so I'd love to just see what they're thinking of, get it out of the head into the paper. And so I'm looking at what they're currently proposing, and then what is it going to look like if they don't have the money from CPS?
Jim, Mr. Crossett.
Yeah, I've had, Eve and I were in a meeting with them when initially this topic came up. And I think you raised both of you have raised some good concerns. I think it's not anything that's, to get to the point where the foundation can really be sort of an independent entity versus what they are as ABC will take a number of years. Because they raise about $2 million a year. And if they're going to grow an endowment, you have to go quite a sizable endowment that will fund $2 million a year. So it's going to take time. I think in the planning of this, we have to look at a gradual plan to have it take time for them to rescope what they do and how they interact with us. I also think there's some nimbleness that the foundation has in terms of some of the fundraising activities that we don't want to lose out on. And so we have to be careful not to throw out the baby with the bathwater. I'm very optimistic that this can be very successful. I think the opportunity for them to rebrand themselves as CPS's foundation will enable them to raise a lot more money over time. So I think there's a big upside to this. And I also think in the planning that it can easily be planned to address your concerns, but to get to your expectations, it can't happen overnight, or all of a sudden we're just going to lose the benefits that they're providing now. So let's see what else I wanted to say about this. I don't know. I'm optimistic. I think it's a good idea. Oh, I know what I want to say is I think we need to get a draft of an MOU so that you can actually see something in writing. I think we need to have that be something that we put together in an initial format so that you can actually see something in writing that we can have a discussion about. Is that fair to say, Dane?
I think that probably the administration has come with these three options, and I think where their recommendation is going is initially looking at the ABC folks instead of necessarily creating some separate thing or doing it internally ourselves. But I don't know if it's an MOU, Jim, or if it's us sharing all of our concerns or all of our hopes with the administration. This reminds me of creating the preschool promise piece, where everybody knew where we wanted to get, but we didn't know how to get there. And what that tended to end up being, especially in the beginning, was let's have the administration keep listening to our issues and concerns and the other parties' issues and concerns, and keep working it as a living document. I don't know if it has to be yet an MOU, but ultimately that's what it would have to be. But I would hope that we are able to send the administration on to working with it. I think that would be beneficial, and I think it is important to get it done in a way that's fair and correct. Dr. Moffitt?
So I'm not exactly sure then if I need to direct my questions to the administration. I guess just as a point of process, what are we saying? Are we saying that we're to decide on what this looks like with that option from the recommendation by administration? And I don't feel like I have enough information.
You don't, none of us do. And the reality is, we have not, as a board, determined what we want to use this foundation for. That's a board decision. That's the whole board talking about it. It isn't necessarily finding a bigger role for ABC or a smaller role for ABC or a parallel something. It's really, we have to figure out why, and it can't just be so we can raise money. We have to know what this foundation stands for, what this foundation's going to be about. Is it about 8 to 3? Is it about after 3 o'clock? Is it about career tech? Is it about particular groups of students? That's one of the things we're going to have at least an initial discussion on when we have our retreat. It's one of the topics that we want to be talking about, and that can influence and inform what the administration is trying to figure out for us now. But I think our concerns, and this would have been how we did it with preschool, to have a contact person in the administration, be it the superintendent or general counsel, whomever, and start sending the concerns, the questions, the issues, the reasons we love it, any of that stuff, so that they can start to build some sense of what we may or may not want, and we don't know yet for what we will use this foundation. It isn't, none of these schools or these districts just have a foundation to raise money about whatever. There's usually an intent, there's usually a concern. There has to be a concern that we're not going to get rid of the other foundations that already exist. There are certain rules or certain stipulations. So maybe some stipulations. We're not getting rid of the foundations that exist. If we have another foundation, it doesn't mean ABC it has to go away. Whatever, I think we send it to General Counsel, and it'd be great if you all would do that prior to our retreat so that the administration can come back and say, we've been looking at some stuff for you. We think this could be addressed.
Well, I agree that is a step. I think my first step is to understand if the foundation is necessary. Like, do we agree that there should be a foundation? And then we can talk about the type. But for me, I want to understand what the role of the foundation would be. And I think I'm there on ABC, but if it is ABC, what does it look like? Because ABC is so entrenched already. And so for me, I need to answer question 1. What would be the role of the foundation? I'm fine with that. I understand your recommendation from an administrative point of view, but I want to understand in writing why that recommendation is being made. I do also understand there are entities that do not want to give to CPS. I'm very familiar with that. I do understand that ABC has been a fiscal sponsor for entities and a pass-through, and I understand what that is. So I understand the need for it. I just would like to have something in writing to tell me this is what the foundation, the CPS Foundation, would do. And because ABC is entrenched with us, this is what this is going to look like for ABC when they get out of underneath us. And then that's, I think, an ABC presentation or an administration presentation. I don't know, but that's what my expectation is. What does that look like when they are not? I am all for building a foundation. I understand it takes years, but it doesn't. If we're going to invest in that, then that's us doing a foundation. That's not them. So I think there's too many questions for me to just, I just want to understand the process.
Well, I think this helps me put on the agenda the question or the second question or whatever for this discussion, and that is board work. Board work as to we need a foundation, we don't need a foundation, you know, I think we do, and why do we do it, and what would be its purpose? Why does it actually increase our value? Why is it a plus? One last comment, Mr. Craig.
I have no problem with the recommendation. I guess I would want it to be clear because I don't believe saying they'll have time to wind it down is the way to get them to wind it down. Because I think what we'll end up having is them still be a vendor and be a foundation. And I don't think that looks good in any space whatsoever. And so I would need more hardline definitives, and it can't be a 5-year. It has to be a hardline 1 to 2 for me. And the reason for that is, again, if I'm a resource coordinator at another place who's trying to get resources and products and things into the building that I do not otherwise have, is there an implication or a look to their resource coordinator getting more than I get, right? Is there an inference that can be made from that? And I think that's a problem from an ethics standpoint. And so I do think there's some issues with that. I think the other part to it is also the current administrative costs that are built into their contracts for how they're managing those employees for which they are providing to us is also now we're going to have another set of administrative costs that would come with them managing a foundation. And so like those are things that have to be lined up first, right? Like I don't believe we can have 2 sets of administrative costs of providing services to the district. And so those are things that I would want us, as we flesh it out, to fully develop. Because otherwise, I do think we'll end up with a space where we'll be, I want to say overpaying, but we'll be paying for basically 2 resources to be done, as opposed to a more streamlined approach to what we were hoping a foundation would be able to serve.
Thank you. Mr. Crossett?
Yeah, I appreciate all the concerns and issues that have been raised. I just hope that we can go forward and continue to work with them and communicate with them and share with them and try to build this. I think my impression of the current board members of ABC is that they are extremely supportive of CPS. And they love doing good things for CPS, and I think it's important that they feel appreciated and noticed. And so I think that's something else just to keep in mind, that they came to us with this idea to make everything better for everyone, and let's just keep that in mind. And I think all of these issues are very much, we'll be able to work them out. I can't see why they can't be. So.
Thank you, Mr. Crossett. I think we're all in agreement to pursue what this might be, and we have opportunity to do so. We'll move on now to the board matters. I have one thing to pass out. Some of you may have had this chart at another meeting, but I asked board staff, and they put this together because, you know, I'm a visual learner. We tried to put on a chart, and we don't need to discuss this evening, I just want to share it, the board work for this school year that is before us, the work that needs to be done. And on there, you can see we, of course, have our treasurer search, and we have 6 master contracts, negotiations, and we have a number of other items on it. And I know that we've also have to come to grips with the superintendent search. And I appreciate those of you that submitted ideas regarding the superintendent search and what that might entail. But as you look at this chart with the treasurer departing and the treasurer team in transition, we also have, as you can see at the top, we completed a budget finally that we're living with now, and we have to, as you heard Chairman Craig talk about, the beginning of a budget effort for the next fiscal year, and then the negotiation settlement. And so I just wanted us to kind of look at that and see as we begin to talk in terms of we have this interim team and when they started and how long they would be here or what have you. So there's a visual image. I think the next time we meet, I think we want to come to grips with the issue of the superintendent search. We can put together the ideas from a couple of people regarding what that might look like and when it should be. I think there's some people on the board that thinks we may not have to have one. I think there's some people that believe that we need to have one, and that's good dialogue. Maybe that's another opportunity for full board dialogue. I think it just goes to show really that we have a busy year yet ahead of us. And some of it didn't get done last year, and some of it needs to get done for sure this year because of that. That's all I had to say, was to share that chart and talk in terms of thank those people that have been talking about the superintendent search, and thank those people that submitted ideas for superintendent evaluation. I did ask interim superintendent Murphy to submit some ideas as well regarding an evaluation, not a search. And so we have at least a couple of members have submitted something about an evaluation, but also I think incorporating some views regarding the previous evaluation as we start to anticipate a search or decide what to do about a search. Part of the previous superintendent was about state standards for superintendents. That was part of the previous superintendents, any number of them, the standards. So I did ask the interim superintendent to be looking at the state standards, and I think put together a document or something that is both a self-assessment and also what the board might be doing. So I don't know if we want to share that document now, or we can share it electronically, since it's a little bit later in the evening, what you would like to do, interim superintendent. I mean, this is not about a search, but it's about the other piece, which is the evaluation of the interim.
I'm happy to share it electronically.
That'd be great. If you'll pass it out, then people can have an opportunity to absorb it and think about it. And also, I would like, since the superintendent's going to do that, I think if Mr. Lindy and Ms. Mapp would share their suggestions, either email or now or whatever, how you feel comfortable doing.
Were we the only two people who submitted suggestions?
Yes.
Way to go. Nice job.
So there are 3 of us so far. You, Kendra, and me. I did too. And Kareem has now submitted, was that most recently. So, and we have this.
I'm confused. I thought it was just Kendra and me.
We're getting better. We're getting better. We're gonna get it all done. But this way we can kind of have this information. Can't do it off-site, can't do it offline or any of that stuff. It has to be done publicly. But we've got stuff that we can certainly work and see each other's work. So let's get that together, and then we don't need to dwell on it any further tonight. But if Ms. Murphy, if you want to throw the
Well, I didn't understand that I needed to bring copies. I just had one copy that I printed for myself.
Good. Okay.
So,
She's been out of the classroom a long time now. See, I bring too much paper. The board appreciates you rather than my mess over here with all these papers. Not a problem, but we can share that electronically. I believe even the board staff has it. So I think let's do it that way. Great. Any other topics about any questions about the year ahead of us still and what we have to accomplish? If not, we're going to go to Mr. Crossett.
Thank you. My topic is the Innovation Council, which is an idea that I brought forth just verbally. I got all of you a document about that just a little bit before this board meeting. And so I'm hoping that the next step in this would be a chance for you to read that document and provide feedback. I have shared this with Interim Superintendent Murphy and with our in-house counsel, Dan Hoying. They both have given it the thumbs up as to something that we could proceed with to develop further. I think just, I don't want to have to read, oh, there it is. It's up there. But
You go, Rob.
the Innovation Council is a group of teachers, principals, students, and others, including parents and community members, committed to thinking about innovation and assisting in making tactical and strategic directions within CPS. So this could be something that's ongoing and continuously helping the district to improve over time. And I just think maybe it's an opportunity for ideas. I know Board Member Craig mentioned to me early on, we got lots of ideas, and this might be a way for some of these ideas to come to fruition and implementation and make a difference in our district. I do think, though, that if ideas come to this council that are really big and giant strategic ideas, the council would have to have some obligation to turn those over to the board. Those wouldn't necessarily be, I think this would focus more on tactical issues and operational issues more so than the big idea issues for this council. So I'll just leave it at that and wait for your guys' feedback. Maybe we can talk a little bit about it at the retreat. But, and I think Dan mentioned that this was a document that he felt was something that was workable for a starting point. Is that right, Dan?
Do you like it, Dan?
There you go. Okay.
Thumbs up?
So,
All right.
so anyway, I appreciate your consideration and
I think
thank
it's
you.
great. We are a district of innovation, and sometimes we get a little sluggish, so this is good. Mr. Craig?
I just wanted to say like two real quick thoughts, and I think this is a great opportunity for us to utilize the information of folks who are within our community and our partners to be a part of that kind of discussion. And I think with anything that would come from those discussions, that they certainly should come before the board. And but I think maybe also working them more through the superintendent's office, because we also have to think about the feasibility of some of the things that we would want to do. And so I think working them through that wing might be a better way to bring them forward to the board, is to have kind of administration, treasurer's office lead those recommendations to the board, and therefore we would better understand what, because I do think we have a lot of folks in the community who propose a lot of great ideas of things that we have no way of doing. So I had someone tell me the other day, we should buy all the buses up, and then we were like, that's a great idea. But this would be a great way to do that.
Great, thank you, Mr. Craig. Any other comments regarding the Innovation Council? We like it. All right, appreciate it. A proposed consent agenda has been distributed. Assistant Treasurer, would you please make sure we keep any record of any exceptions? Do any board members or does the superintendent or general counsel have any suggestions for exceptions to the consent agenda? Member Mapp.
I just would like to abstain from the treasurer's report, page 10, line items 7 and 8.
Thank you. Any other exceptions? Well, hearing none and knowing that that's been recorded, the chair will entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda as distributed. Motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Any discussion beyond what Member Mapp did regarding the exception? If not, we'll take a vote.
All right, Mr. Craig.
Yes.
Mr. Crossett.
Yes.
Mr. Lindy.
Yes.
Ms. Mapp.
Yes.
Dr. Moffett.
Yes.
Vice President Weinberg.
Yes.
And President Bolden.
Yes, thank you. I know we have also some updates. I don't know, Superintendent, you want to share just some ideas or thoughts as we kind of are moving into phase 2? Any ideas or things you want to share regarding phase 1 as it's being not completed, but is in full glory?
Sorry, I did give everybody a handout on that one. And so what we did was try to share this with you around many of what the board's goals are, in particular with the forecast So looking at innovation, looking at operational efficiency, fiscal responsibility, embracing students' cross-cultural identities in the learning experience, providing individualized support, and then recognizing that student success is not defined solely through test results, but is uniquely defined for each student. And so you'll see commentary, for example, about some of the programs that we do have being expanded. I did include this now because this is the work that we're doing right now. We are very excited that we opened our junior high as a result of phase 1, and that is going really well. We appreciate the work of the principal, Danielle Battle. We are investigating Navy and Air Force Junior ROTC. We mentioned that in particular because we do already have the Army Junior ROTC started at Aiken and added the second instructor this year. We're looking at how we lay out and design our specialized classrooms, because what we learned, one of the things we learned with phase 1 is that we are transporting kids all across the district, and we may not need to do that, and so that might allow us to have some operational and financial efficiencies put in place. The Dr. Odell Owens Center for Learning and the Promise Center combined, again, we think that there are going to be great efficiencies there, and it also will make sense in terms of our building utilization, growing and moving forward. Growing out and considering what we are going to do with centralized enrollment, we think that's particularly important because we think that the first experience our new families have will create a lasting impact moving forward. And I think this will also help us to align the district goals a little bit better for the entry points of our families. Fiscal responsibility, of course, we dove into ad hoc as a result of day 1 being about closing the gap with our budget, and we saw immediately some things that we could do differently, and so that look is allowing us to move forward with the work of the ad hoc team. The creation of the RAP, so many times board members express the needs that our kids have that sometimes prevent them from immediately being able to think about what is happening in classrooms academically. And so we want to expand upon services that we offer our students and families experiencing homelessness, and we plan to do that with this RAP concept. Redrawing the lines, the district lines, in terms of what schools will fit into which corridors, and in terms of the feeder patterns that we want to bring back and emphasize with many of our schools. We looked at the number of our students who are enrolling on the autism spectrum and looking at the services that we currently provide them and asking ourselves very carefully, what can we do to improve and enhance those experiences? We are researching CTE programming. We have cost out those particular programs as it relates to automotive, cosmetology, and entrepreneurship. We're excited to move forward there. We're also looking at career and technical education opportunities in our junior highs and middle schools. You'll hear a little bit more about that at the October 28th meeting. I think you do know that the Zoo Academy, we are now looking at as a district-wide program. So those are just a few of the highlights coming out of this phase 1.
Thank you, Interim Superintendent. Any questions or comments for the Interim Superintendent? Member Mapp.
Yeah, so thank you for providing us with this update. This really just came to mind. So these schools were essentially kind of like a pilot for us, correct? In terms of the growth plan, right, and the sustainability plan. Has there been discussion around any type of evaluation about how these schools are doing to use that as a means of, giving us information and data about how we move forward with the next phase of the growth plan, if that's something that we decide to do as a district? But I hear that they're doing really well, but I would like to see some objective metrics that's available for us to be able to assess how well these schools are doing. Have we met our goal, or are we meeting our goals in terms of consolidating these schools? I think that would be very helpful information for us as a board, but also as a community as we're talking about moving forward into another phase.
We have not yet, but thank you.
Okay, thank you. I definitely would look forward to seeing that. And then the other question that I have is around the magnet process. And I know that we had some schools that lost magnet status. Can you give information around what that process entails? And is that an administrative decision or is it a board decision? Just wanting clarity around it.
Several years ago, it was a board decision. We just did not, they still maintained a lot of the privileges around having a magnet status in terms of enrollment and transportation services. So while they have not been a magnet school in quite some time, whether that be a college prep magnet or a Paideia magnet, they still had those benefits. So we are at this stage actually moving forward with what that looks like to not have those benefits.
Okay. So at this point in time, just for clarity, it was previously a board decision, but it is an administrative decision, or maybe a dual.
The implementation, I would say, is administrative.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I would say boards create magnets over time, and boards end magnets. And I think the ending of the magnets in part was where there were where there was significant under-enrollment at magnets. Would be an example of, the Paideia example. We don't have that problem with College Hill Fundamental. It's not under-enrolled, but is there a way that that building might be used, or can we afford to have too many magnets? I think also stopping, talking in terms of our Montessoris really aren't magnets. Our exclusive kind of entrance schools are not magnets as such. So it's been an important, our magnets have been important to our surviving the last 20 years and also maintaining population here. But they have, some of them, particularly the under-enrolled or specific with them, core group, have become over time in the last several years particularly unsustainable financially, in part because of transportation and their under-enrollment. So it's a good question, and I think we're also kind of known as, here's your neighborhood schools and here's your magnet. And it also created, to Mr. Craig's point of view about an hour ago, that's part of our messaging problem. And now I think we're trying to overcome that. So there's lots of bigger things that are part of this, but I think your request of let's have an evaluation, it's only been several weeks, but let's have an evaluation of, is this good? I'm thrilled that they've merged Owens, the Lighthouse, and Promise Center, two groups of kids maybe that we weren't serving as well as we needed to. So these are big things that have been happening, and I'm excited about. Mr. Craig?
I was just going to add on to your point with regard to the magnets. I think part of the reason also we decided as a board to remove it was that there were services being provided for students who were actually not receiving any magnet educational resources. So like we were still shipping students some distance for no additional programming, right? And so we said, if you're going to be a magnet, you actually have to have magnet programming being offered to the students that we are transporting. And so, and I know that raised a lot of concern with some folks who had benefited from having students be brought in from outside of their area through magnet status. So what we did say at the time was that students could still attend, we just would not provide the resources like transportation to get them there in the same way we would do for a student who's in a magnet program attending a school.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. Other comments? Dr. Moffitt.
I just also want to offer just a little bit of additional context. What we found in ad hoc as well was like Taft Elementary, most of those students were being bused across the city from the west side to go to Taft. But because it was a magnet, they were getting that privilege or that opportunity, but they could also go to their neighborhood school. So we were paying for busing for that. So it made, some of the findings of the ad hoc was about looking at the magnets where we are significantly busing. To Board Member Craig's point, we were significantly busing, and those were those schools that were listed, Woodford, College Hill, and Taft Elementary, where we're busing them. And then we also talked about grandfathering them for 2 years. So Silverton's magnet status was removed last year, but it was, I think they got something, they got,
Yeah, a year or two.
yeah, they got like 2 years around maintaining them so that their growth doesn't go down. We were watching them. So we talked about removing, I think with former Superintendent Wright, she wanted to right-size some of the things that the board had made decisions on, but just the administration had not enacted. So that's what Superintendent Murphy is doing, is the board's decision was made years ago, but it's just now, it is administration's
Went through
responsibility.
3 superintendents to do it.
It is administration's responsibility. It's not their decision, but it's your responsibility to enforce what the board has said.
Thank you, Dr. Moffett. Mr. Lindy?
Thanks. Ms. Bolden, I was trying to remind myself, is it fair to assume, as in Silverton, that if there is a change like this, kids who are currently there are grandfathered?
Mhm.
And that should be true anytime there's a magnet change?
For the year, I think, or 2, I can't remember. I don't know which year we're in now,
Yeah,
but
it was no
they were
transportation.
yeah.
Yes.
I'm just hearing, so grandfathered in does not include transportation. So what doesn't
For a year
include?
it didn't for the second year, I think.
Okay.
I think isn't that
I think
right?
that's how Ironetta did it. Yeah.
So I think so, and then they were given the heads up so that they could prepare.
And that would be true for any other magnet change?
That I know of, yes.
Thanks.
Mount Washington. But, Mount Washington and J.P. Parker and Covedale, they were partial magnets for college preparatory. So it really was a group within the school. So those were kind of different. But again, the cost was just astronomical. And very frankly, we'd really be looking at high schools of choice more radically right now than we are if indeed we hadn't gone fully metro. Because the financial burden of the complete high schools of choice in part was when indeed we had the extra routes and what have you. So that's about the only place where we've made any kind of a savings there. Other questions or comments? I appreciate the superintendent's summary. All right. Now we'll go to the item on the agenda regarding Imagination Library, and I know that the assistant treasurer is somewhat prepared to answer some questions. We won't put him on the hot seat. We might put Jen on the hot seat, but we're going to be somewhat kind to you.
I will say the treasurer's very good at keeping records, so I was able
All
to
right,
find
excellent.
a whole folder of stuff.
Madam Vice President, I think you put this on the agenda.
I did not put this on the agenda, but I will refer to my colleague over there. I had a concern and I had questions, and I just wanted a little bit further information in regards to the amount. Why was it cut? When was it cut? And what are we going to do moving forward? Because it is a concern for me.
Okay. Dr. Moffett, do you want to?
So it was my topic. I've heard from all the way up as far as Columbus and actually Washington that have said, what is up with the cut for Imagination Library? I reached out to the superintendent, to the interim superintendent Murphy, who shared that this was something from a previous administration. I don't recall that. We decided to cut Imagination Library. So if I could I just asked for a little bit more context. I know I was not the only board member that was reached out to. A board member, Vice President Weinberg as well, and maybe others. So I just wanted to understand, the cost I think was $65,000 a year. And then when was that decision to cut?
Yeah, so just to set a little context, this is kind of a partnership. And we actually pay Cincinnati Children's Hospital a sum every year. Looking back through our records, the last 4 fiscal years, we've had a purchase order with them for around $65,000. The numbers varied every year, but the total over those 4 years was $250,000 total. So 62.5, roughly an average. Last year's cost was $65,000. I understand there's an invoice or proposal this year for the same amount. As far as kind of where it sits in the budget, obviously this is to provide books to young children in our area. Really cool program. We actually, code it as an advertising expense. It's not directly an expense to our students, but these are potential students. These are students we hope come to CPS and come with a good degree of reading skills. So it's been in the marketing kind of communications budget all those years. As far as when it was cut, so I did go back and look at the data that we had from the different budget rounds. It's quite an extensive amount of budget cuts. Looking at timing, there was an opportunity back in October of '23 when the chief of staff at the time brought each kind of central office department head in to go through cuts. And at that time, you can see clearly that the marketing communications cut about $100,000 from their budget. And this was part of that overall cut. So October of '23 was when it was taken out of the budget.
Thank you, Assistant Treasurer. That's as good a summary as I think we've had. I have a quick question, though. When we had the combined meeting with the Healthy Neighborhoods group here, and there was the woman that indeed is, I think, running it now, or at least is somewhat in charge of it, I kept asking about Children's Hospital, because as you said, our invoice, or whatever you call that, our relationship was with Children's. And I couldn't, when I asked her about Children's Hospital, she was saying, no, they're more a partner. Is the invoice still with Children's?
Yes, every year's purchase order and every year's invoice is paid to Children's.
Okay, and Children's then gives it to this organization that is running it. It's not Children's that's running it. Is it the, what's the name of the organization?
It's called Imagination Library, and to my knowledge, it is like a program under Children's Hospital.
Okay.
So it is, maybe they're the fiscal sponsor, I'm not exactly certain. My concern is that that wasn't clearly defined, that $100,000 was going to be cutting that particular program.
Right, well.
At all. And if this was done last year, I mean, I wasn't aware of that. We've had them in 2 times, and not once has anyone said, hey, that cut's not made. We get a cut, and now Columbus and, this is apparently, I don't know if this is a federal,
I think
if this is tied federally, but I want to know, I guess the point of bringing this up is, where at all can we find money to reconcile that, at least for this year? Because to my knowledge, it was inferred, if not definitely implied, that we were going to have them as continuing their services. I don't know, we haven't, to my knowledge, I haven't asked for data around who they serve, how many CPS students, but when they come to us 2 times with the understanding that they're partnering with the district, I think it is disingenuous to imply that, you come, but then when you invoice us, we don't have any idea of it. So I would like for us to either further, did we vote? We voted to cut that?
I believe it was in the votes, but it was probably a package. There were some packages of administrative cuts, that were made, and it was done really early in the process, I think before a lot of the voting
It was back in
happened.
2023.
It was in October, yeah. So, one of the first, that was even before, I think, the retreat, the actual budget, the board retreat that happened.
That was, that's when we also first learned about Riverview, if I recall, repurposing Riverview and stuff, which.
That was January.
Is that January? Oh, that was a January work?
But I don't know, I don't know what's the process to get them reinstated, is what it,
Well, I think if there's an interest among the board members of restoring it, it would require, I guess, a motion and a second and a passage of that motion, unless you wanted to wait and get any more information about it.
I don't need any more information about it. I would like to restore it. If that's what I need to do. If we voted it, I guess we have to vote it again. So just make a motion to restore.
Mr. Craig?
Just wanted to clarify one point also that, and I know the treasurer shared, we had a little discussion around some of these different things also, but part of the reason it was under marketing was because these were directly coming out of the general fund. dollars. And so the struggle has always been that general fund dollars are supposed to be spent on
Public purpose?
current students who are for serving a public purpose. So what they used, the way they pocketed it was to recognize and appreciate the fact that for our public purpose, there is a value to marketing this information out to young kids who may become a CPS student, young babies who would become potential CPS students. And so I do think, again, it's not a judgment as to whether or not we should or shouldn't do it, but one to clarify that this is also part of an example of why central budget matters also, because this is stuff that had to come through marketing and communication for that sole purposes of serving a public purpose.
And again, historically, going back to the very first moments, and this was brought to us by Member Morosky, and at the earliest downset, there was talk of $500,000 eventually. It was, the issue was for the treasurer, proper public purpose. That's going to be on my, it's going to be on her gravestone anyway.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, and so that's been drilled into our head, and indeed, this was a reach, but obviously something that the other boards and this board apparently are deeply committed to. Mr. Lindy.
I think even I were the only, or Ms. Bolton and I were the only people on the board when some of the voting on this happened, but it was one of my very first board meetings.
Right.
And I think just some other historical context that I don't think has gotten brought up tonight was that the original program was part of this fund where the idea was philanthropy will put up a few years of a trial to see whether the results are strong, with the understanding that the public organization would pick up long-term funding if the results were good. And they had a signed letter from the CPS superintendent, as I understand it, agreeing to that. They did everything they were supposed to. The results were good. And then they came to CPS, and by good, I mean like met the outcomes that they were looking for.
Right.
And then they came to CPS expecting, I think quite reasonably, for CPS to uphold its end of the agreement. And so I voted to support that at the time because they did what they said they were going to do. It was having good results for children, the vast majority of whom would be CPS students. So it never felt like a close call on proper public purpose for me. Like, I understand that there are budget constraints and real budget constraints, and it may be that this had to go because there were just no good or better options on the table. I think just for me personally, before revisiting it, like I'm kind of surprised we haven't heard from more of the, not any, but even more from some of the local folks who were involved in it. But I just wanted to make sure I shared that historical piece.
And indeed, we did fund it for a few years, and this cut was new and different. Is that correct, Assistant Treasurer, of us funding it for a while?
Yeah, we did, like I said, we funded it for 4 consecutive years to the tune of $250,000 over those 4 years.
And it's just this particular fiscal year that we have not done that, but it was part of the packaging of many of the cuts we had to do during those difficult times.
Yes.
So the chair's going to entertain a motion to restore this spending, and we'll require a second, and then we'll vote on that motion. Who would like to make the motion? Dr. Moffitt?
So moved.
Second to our Vice
Second.
President. Thank you. Discussion, Mr. Lindy.
On discussion, so who is, board members noted, but who is asking for the district to do this?
So I put this on the calendar, on the agenda.
The woman that's in charge of it did make
Christy
appearance
Hyde.
at the combined council and school board meeting several months ago,
Yes,
here. The
Yes.
one we had here, not the one we had at council.
but I've even heard from some of our legislators that, hey, I heard you all cut Imagination Library. And I asked for Ms. High, I said, well, let me ask about it and get a little bit more information. I reached out to Interim Superintendent Murphy to say, hey, did we really cut this program? And she said, yes. I said, why? She said that was prior to me, so let me do a little bit of digging. And I actually put Jen on that email and then asked for clarification. And Jen said that this was previously, I said, I don't remember voting on this. So I think other board members may need to weigh in as well because other board members were getting calls. So that's when I asked to have this put on the agenda so that we could, if I was wrong and that we voted on it, I wanted to have that clarification as well.
Well, and the woman that appeared
Ms. Hyde,
before
Christy
us
Hyde.
asked that we do this, not necessarily restore it, because she may not have been familiar that it had been cut.
She had not.
And so she was telling us about what a wonderful program it is that we've been doing for several years. And so we've actually, in public session, had a presentation as recently as the last several.
With the last city meeting, she
Yes.
came and presented, and so it was just, the implication was that we were funding it, and so when
Because
she
we
asked.
had been.
Because we had been, and so when she asked me to help her understand, I had no answer.
And
So
now
that's
we
how that
do.
happened.
Any other, Mr. Craig?
Just to finish.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. I have a very helpful context. I appreciate that. I think I have I feel torn on this because on the one hand, I do like this program. I think the results have been strong. I like the idea that we do what we say we're going to do. On the other hand, this feels very quick. And I'm particularly interested in like what our administrative leadership has to say about whether they think this is a good idea or not. And I think that would be, just for my personal vote, yes or no, would be pretty important to hear what our interim superintendent and assistant treasurer have to say.
I think the program is amazing. I know a lot of people who have benefited from it, as with young 3- and 4-year-old children. What is rolling through my head as I listen to this discussion is finding where we're going to get the $65,000 from, which seems like a small amount of money in the grand scheme of things, but I just wonder where we're going to get the $65,000 from at this point.
Would the motion maker and seconder, to your point, entertain a motion that it's dependent upon finding those funds or not? Mr. Lindy?
No, I was just interested in what the assistant treasurer had to say, but we'll do a defer
Oh, I'm sorry, Mike.
to when the right time for that is.
Kind of the exact same point the interim superintendent brought up. I mean, $65,000 is a staff member salary. It's, some fairly other, instruction, a good amount of instructional supplies. It's, it's copies to give kids stuff to take home. I mean, I've heard all of those things and just in this week of people, I don't like to say looking for money. I think it's not a good term, but all of these funds of people coming with needs that they've identified. Obviously, if it's the will of the board, we would have to, the appropriation set, we would have to look at the budget and find a spot to reduce.
Thank you.
And
Vice President?
I just wanted to add, in terms of, as we're looking at services that actually benefit and touch our kids, I think for me, I'm going to speak as a personal statement. I think it's important, especially for literacy and our young children, to really touch them with the ability to get those books and to get those services and to get those resources. So one reason why I did second this is because I think it's something very important and it's actually also valuable in the long run as well.
Any other comments over here? Yes, Member Matt?
So thank you. I definitely agree wholeheartedly with the program and the impact that it has on students and families. But I am concerned and just wondering if we could possibly have kind of that information to see if we are able to identify where we could possibly get the funds. I just want to make sure we're giving you all the opportunity to look further into it before we kind of impulsively make a decision. So trying to give that, just give that opportunity for you all to do a little bit more research and bring it back to us if that's possible. If you think that you are able to do it, then that's great. But again, to your point, you're trying to identify where those funds could potentially come from.
Mr. Craig and Mr. Crossett?
So just two quick thoughts. One is that I think just wanted to make sure we're narrowing it also to returning it as it was originally
Thank you.
funded, because again, I think it has to go back to the marketing communications budget to serve a public purpose, as well as although it's great to say that this is a product that would benefit our students. I don't know that we have any actual evidence to say that happens, right? Because this is any student, or this is any child born in this area, so they don't have to come to our school at all. They can go to a million different places and still get these same benefits. And so there's that aspect of it as well, which is what the concern was about public purpose before. And then, so if we're returning it from that same method of which it was funded, and then the other thing is just for this fiscal year, I do think this may be something long-term, as we talked about having a foundation and some of these other things, this may be something that fits more into a foundation long-term to support than necessarily the district to support for that specific reason. I think this is a great program. I went to the opening of the library down at the Museum Center and the Children's Museum, and it's a phenomenal thing that they've added to that to add more reading and education and understanding for those students. It's a great program that my own niece and nephew have benefited from, who are also CPS students, right? But I don't know that we have this same ability to say that long-term going forward, this is what we would allocate this 65 as opposed to something else. And so I think for this year, I would be more supportive if we were to narrow it to returning it to marketing communications budget and for just the 1 year.
So I'm happy to amend the motion. I would also say, well, to amend the motion that pending any finding of funds, but I also would like to direct, in an effort to find those funds, the administration and the treasurer's office to look at some of the PD that's on here. Hamilton County Educational Service Center, we've got a lot of virtual PD, $60,000. Not saying it's not necessary. I'm just saying, let's look at Harvard University PD for $210,000, I'm sorry. Let's look at some of the PD that we have that perhaps we could look at maybe adjusting for the $65,000 for this year, in part because we've given them the implication that it was already there. But I'm also wanting to have some data to justify it further. So I'm happy to amend my motion that we restore Imagination Libraries funding for $65,000 coming from the marketing or communications marketing budget for this particular year only, pending finding the monies to do so.
Mr. Crossett.
Is this funding have to be paid all at once? Or is this funding that we can pay during the year? And I asked that question in that probably I know there's a fairly big dollar amount of contingency built into the budget. And that as the year goes, that's probably a good opportunity to find some savings maybe?
We did cut half of that contingency the last go-round. And then also, Dr. Moffitt, some of the items you're pointing out, suggesting to us are entitled dollars, professional development. We will go, well, pending the pleasure of the board, go back and try, definitely.
Yes,
Thank you,
That's all I ask. Thank you.
Superintendent. Member Mapp.
Yes, so I do know that with Imagination Library, there are opportunities to receive these books from students' primary care providers or doctor's offices, and I think even the libraries as well. Do we have information where there may be overlap so that we are making sure that our students are receiving it, but there's not overlap in spending, right, if they may get the resources from other providers?
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest concerns, Board Member Mapp, is we don't know if our students are receiving it. And I think that was from day one in 2020, I believe. So we'll dig in.
Well, we have a motion on the floor. We've had discussion. It's been friendly amended in some manner or form. At least we have an idea of what the amendment truly is. We'll take a vote. Assistant Treasurer?
Sure. Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Mr. Crossett?
Yes.
Mr. Lindy?
Yep.
Ms. Mapp?
Yes.
Dr. Moffitt?
Yes.
Vice President Weinberg?
Yes.
And President Bolden?
Yes. I believe we've now concluded our agenda. Do we have any assignments?
Can we go back to the inquiries? I actually have two.
Okay,
Really
go
quick.
ahead.
So this was something that I wanted to bring up a couple weeks ago, and I'm happy that board member Lindy is here. My two inquiries, first, just wanted to ask Interim Superintendent Murphy regarding an ask of our parent champion. I'm not quite sure what the specific ask was, but I know that there was a request for names and a schedule, and I just wanted to have a quick discussion just to see the process on that. And I don't know if I missed it as an assignment or if this is just something that was asked. You can clarify, Board Member Lindy. And then my second question would be, I probably will bring this up for the policy committee for Friday, but I wanted us to look into our transportation policy in terms of exceptions for employees. And I can go into that a little bit further, or I can just give that to the policy committee as well. So Board Member Lindy, that's like a tongue twister, and then Superintendent Murphy, if you could answer as well.
Mr. Lindy.
Yeah, I'm happy to speak on the parent piece. I had emailed the interim superintendent, maybe 6 weeks ago or so, and said, one of the things I'm trying to do this fall is connect with a group of parents to learn more about how I can be helpful as a board member. And I had said, last thing I want to do is get in anybody's way. If people have space for it, and if our parent champion had any recommendations, I'd love to know who some good people to reach out to might be. But I always make a point, right, I try at least not to reach out to staff without checking with the interim superintendent first. So I had emailed the superintendent. She said getting in touch with parent champion was no challenge. We had a lovely conversation. She offered to find some folks for me to talk to. She put me in touch with them. I have been reaching out to them to have some one-on-one conversations.
And with this ask, were the names supposed to come in like different stages, or was this just one inquiry where you wanted one list one time?
I'm not particularly picky.
But what was the ask? That was the question.
So
What was the ask?
my ask was, what would be doable for you and not an imposition? And so what we talked about in our phone conversation was that she would try to find 10 parents. I shared a list of parents I'd already found in the schools that they came from. And I shared that, what I'm really trying to do is make sure I'm hearing from a diverse group of parents. Here are the schools I've already represented. What kind of timeline would work for you to have some recommendations? And so then I followed the timeline that she suggested.
And you did share that, or I think the email was shared out, so if any other board members want to view it, I just was confused by the ask because I think our parent champion then responded back with some other things in terms of your ask, and I just wanted to make sure the process was being followed correctly.
Great. Thank you, Vice President. Do you have a second one before I go to Mr. Crossett? No? Did you have a second one?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was reading this email. The second is about the policy committee. I'm going to bring to their attention the issue about transportation, and if we can make some type of policy, or if there's a policy in place regarding exceptions for employees.
And part of that exception is that on a daily basis, the student goes to different places?
Yes, I think the ask involved a particular parent who wanted, or an employee who wanted their particular child to be able to ride the metro bus to their place of business, where they worked. And I just wanted to kind of look into it a little further to see what specifically are our guidelines, how do we have this in place, what's the policy for that, et cetera.
Can I just make sure I understand the issue?
Sure.
So this would be like a student who has a Metro Pass from CPS and finishes school? And
Not quite.
So this is we currently do not provide transportation for out-of-district students, including students of our employees. So what we do for the students of our employees is they can get a Metro Pass at a discounted rate. I think the ask is, could we consider that we absorb the cost of a Metro Pass for our employees, even if they're out of district?
If they're out of district, as long as they're staying within district to utilize that pass.
Staying within the
And if
district.
there was a policy in place for that, or what do we have in place?
Just to clarify, the student, the family lives outside of the district. The parents work both in the district. The student attends a district school. That's not where their parents work. And the cost was like $500. So the parents were asking, could the student just get the bus to one of their places of employment? So it was like a deviated stop, but and you all got these emails because it was sent to every board member. So the request was, hey, can we just get her to be able to go from her school to our place of employment with the Metro card?
And this is not Yellow Bus, this is Metro.
And it cost them like $500 when they did it.
But again, once you start doing deviated stops.
Correct.
That
correct.
starts to be the issue.
But there
And
is a
that's why
policy
we
about
have
it.
to say how exceptional this is or not.
Yes.
Rather than being a precedent for us to find more ways to spend money on buses. Yes.
And this is, I think, the issue I was trying to get my head around, because it seems like, what would the policy discussion be? I mean, you could write a policy that would certainly allow this or not allow this. It seems like the question is a financial one, which is, if were we to do this, and were we to do this for all students for whom it would apply, what would it cost? And is that cost worth it, given other things that we could spend those dollars on? And I said, to me, that feels like a finance question. Now, look, we're happy to take it in policy. This is a preview of what I think we'd be talking about.
You're getting it. Let me tell you, you're getting it. I
feel like I can preview what we're gonna come back with.
every suspicion that You're getting it.
It is policy.
Because Mr. Finance over here is, he has a long leg that just kicked me into, you're getting it.
Yeah, I'm on both committees.
You're screwed either way.
Look, happy to work on it. Happy to work on
There are
it.
4 transportation policies of Cincinnati Public, and somewhere in one of those,
It's in deviated.
there
And I was gonna
is-
say, can I
there's
just add?
deviate, and this is gonna end up being a financial issue.
Yes.
But it can start in policy, because that's where transportation goes to die.
And I will send it in an email, and I will talk to you all further, but I'm just giving you a heads up that this is something that I'm going to be sending your way.
That's great.
And then we can move on to the next step of where it should go after that.
That's great. And I think one request I would have, because we get a lot of emails, if you wouldn't mind, I think you may have just said this, if you would forward the one about this particular issue, I'll make sure I've got it.
It'd be great.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Crossett, I'm sorry to make you wait.
Well, that's quite all right. I'm very patient.
You are.
I wanted to go back to the first topic. So Ben, I admire you for reaching out to get input from parents so that, we can all be more effective. Is that the kind of information that you can share with all of us so that we can all get that?
I'm happy to. Yeah, and I think, like, to the earlier point, I tried to find as many as I could through my existing network, which covers many schools, but not every school, and I'm not looking to talk to every school, but I would like to feel like I have a sense of what a representative set of parents are interested in. And I'd be happy to share that, happy to invite people to conversations. We get into some, can't have too many before it's a publicly noticed meeting, but, open book.
Anyway, yeah, I think it'd be great to share it. It might benefit all of us.
Any other? Yes.
So I think, just to put a bow on that one, it was the email when she responded back that said, this is the first of 4, I'll send you 5 more next week. That sounded like the staff was doing something, which we spent a significant amount of time saying not to do that. The other thing I wanted to ask about for policy was, we spent a lot of time hearing about the transit centers and the code of conduct at the transit centers. I wanted to see if there's something that we could do to kind of strengthen our policy. I don't exactly know which policy the chief was talking about, but is there?
I don't think the chief knew either.
Is there something that we can do in addition to or outside of the code of conduct from a policy level to give some strength to appropriate behaviors as an extension of our students with regard to transportation? The reason I'm asking that is because I asked Dan, where does the responsibility of the board lie or the district lie with regard to transportation? And it's very ambiguous. Are we responsible for students from the time they get on the bus to school and then from the time they get on the bus, and then they get off the bus, at school, and then they get off the bus. It's not very clear in our policy, so I wanted
Kind of
to
bus
ask.
stop to bus stop.
I wanted to add, Dan said it, I don't know if you want to bring it up, but he said that it's clear, but it's unclear. So we looked at that, but I wanted to see if we could go back and have policy kind of maybe add a little bit more teeth to what is already there to talk about some of the conduct or talk about behaviors and expectations. I don't know if that's even possible, but there is something already there with regard to policy and where the district's responsibility lies, but maybe we can strengthen that in policy. So that was what the question, that was what that was for.
So is that an assignment to policy?
Yes.
Okay. Other assignments for today? Member Mapp?
Yes, I wanted to bring back up, I know that there was conversation at previous meetings around the updated policy for the purchasing and goods of services, when looking at our local vendors. We haven't had a time to have more conversation about that, and I know there was supposed to be a presentation that was shared by Chief Burkhardt, and so I was just wondering if we could maybe put that on a future agenda, or if a presentation could be made.
What was it about what vendors? I'm
So
sorry.
it was for the purchasing of goods or service
Oh, yeah,
policy.
that'll
Yeah.
come back. It had to be canceled or delayed, and now Burkhardt is out of town, so when he comes back,
It's ready. He's
Great.
ready. He'll be ready. He's.
Okay,
Super.
perfect.
thank you. Other assignments? I'd like to add two assignments. One, you mentioned about the Air Force and whatever. As long as we have the Army, I'm happy, because my dad did. But I would like to suggest rather than, not rather than, but I think I've had this conversation, I'll just make it public. I think we need to look into the Coast Guard, because you actually do have somebody, I mean, there is a Coast Guard unit here because of our river, and more particularly, and in the Great Lakes area as well. But I think you also have a member of one of the school's LSDMCs who has a background in the Coast Guard, maybe might have some opportunity, because I know how hard you had to work to get the Army here, and I appreciate that. The other I have is an assignment that we don't usually necessarily make public, an assignment for the internal auditor to please research and put together a complete report about the expenses and monies and relationship, particularly as it pertains to transportation, with the Don schools that are no longer called Don any longer. I think we're going to be have that requested of us very soon anyway. Number of students that have actually been Don, and the number of folks that we've paid for. Also, and I hope this is not right, I've been told that we are currently buying daily passes for the Don people, and at the last meeting, I thought we had determined that they will do what we do, or they will pay.
I do not believe we are buying daily passes. We have had 140 or so requests with the names, addresses that we can connect, just like our IDs passes are. If any are, I won't go too far. We have not done that.
Okay, so if they're getting daily passes, they're paying for it, because we don't do daily passes. We have these wonderful special passes, considering we've had a number of folks at some of these transit centers. Okay, that would be for the internal auditor. Yes, sir.
So I have what I would call a friendly assignment.
Please.
It is actually to all of our board members. The now, I believe, third annual Ethics Bowl, High School Ethics Bowl is coming up in January, and they need people to work. It's now a 2-day event, because we have now made it the largest, or one of the largest regional ethics bowls in just 2 years. And all but 2 of our high schools are participating as of last time I checked, so that's
Great.
tremendous, but they need volunteers, so I will send out the information for folks who are willing to volunteer as a moderator, facilitator, or judge, but encourage others to join on as well.
Thank you, Mr. Craig.
Sometime in January, I'll send the information out.
Thank you, and thank you for your leadership in that. You've been very pivotal in getting that done. Member Mapp?
Yeah, so I just wanted to make sure that it was reflected as an assignment. I know we talked about it with the growth plan, but if there can be some type of evaluation tool so we can, again, objectively look at how the progress of those schools are going and compare it to moving into the next phase.
Thank you. That's our assignments for the administration. And please, board members, if you have topics that you would like to see at the Saturday retreat, please give those to Ms. Davis so that she can give it to us.
What's the date for the retreat?
26, is that right?
Okay. Okay, thank you.
8:30 to 2. Breakfast, lunch, and almost dinner. Thank you all. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Thank you very much. And we have a second from the chair.